Chapter 51. The next day, Casterly Rock, Lannister Main Keep Great Hall. Duke Tywin's voice wasn't loud, but his authority was palpable. All the knights of the Westerlands are here. Today, I have several matters to announce. Everyone is welcome to voice their opinions. The entire hall was silent, no one spoke. This pleased Duke Tywin greatly. He preferred his vassals to simply listen. The invitation to offer opinions was merely a polite formality. Of course, Tywin didn't reject genuine opinions, but the key was that you had to have thoroughly considered your opinion and have a complete logical basis for it. Otherwise, you'd best keep your mouth shut. First, the operation of all salt mines in the Westerlands will be taken back by Casterly Rock. The small salt shops under the jurisdiction of the various knights will no longer be supplied with goods. Once their existing stock is sold, that's the end. All mined salt from the Westerlands mines will be transported to Casterly Rock. Do any of you earls have any objections? The 100 or so people in the hall were as quiet as crows. Tywin said, "Very well. Since everyone agrees, I will appoint Sir Kevin as the salt minister of the Westerlands. The entire Westerlands will only be permitted to sell snow salt. For the first 6 months, the price of snow salt will be the same as that of mined salt. After 6 months, the price will increase by 20%. However, once sold externally, the price of snow salt will increase threefold. A fixed quota of snow salt will be implemented within each vassal's territory. The monthly custom quota can only be reduced, not increased. Does anyone have any objections?" The fixed quota was to prevent vassals from buying salt from Casterly Rock at a low price and selling it outside at a high price. Once the fixed quota was calculated, if you sold it outside at a high price, you and the people within your territory would have no salt to eat. The entire hall was silent. No one raised any objections. "Sir Kevin. I accept the Duke's arrangement and accept the position of Salt Minister of the Westerlands." "Good. Second, all vassals in the Westerlands must send 2 generals to Casterly Rock within 3 days to learn the art of commanding troops using war horns. Regarding the war horns, no one is allowed to spread this knowledge to the territories of other dukes. If it is verified that someone has leaked the information, they will be severely punished by military law." Tywin's gaze slowly swept across the entire hall. Wherever his gaze landed, people lowered their eyes, avoiding his gaze. Still, no one raised any objections. "Sir Ravad Clegane." Ravad quickly stepped out of the ranks and responded, "Yes, Duke. I appoint you as the chief instructor for the Westerlands Warhorn training. I give you 1 month to train 2 generals from each vassal's banner in the Westerlands to master the art of commanding troops using war horns, 1 cavalry general and 1 infantry general. Do you have any objections?" Sweetmouth Ravad's usual smiling expression was completely gone, replaced by a serious and stern look. "Yes, Duke." This was a great honor that the Duke bestowed upon the Clegane family, and also Sweetmouth Ravad's honor. "After the warhorn training for the generals of Casterly Rock is completed, within 2 months, I will inspect the warhorn command methods of all vassal legions in the Westerlands and conduct warhorn method assessments for all formation changes and combat marches. Legions that fail the assessment will have their lords and generals severely punished by military law. Do any of you vassals have any objections?" The entire hall remained silent, no one dared to raise an objection. Tywin's gaze slowly swept across the 100 knights and lords in the hall once again. He made it a habit to slowly scan the entire hall after finishing a matter. "Third, starting today, the use of chopsticks will be promoted throughout the Westerlands, starting with the great nobles. Within 6 months, all nobles, knights, legions, and commoners in the Westerlands will use chopsticks and completely replace iron cutlery. Steel is too precious. The Iron Islands have been raising the price of the iron ore they sell us every year. Within all vassal territories, starting tomorrow, blacksmiths are no longer allowed to use iron to manufacture large quantities of plates and knives. The production of any iron cutlery will be stopped. Maester Potter, tell them about the benefits of doing so." Maester Potter cleared his throat. "Lords, I calculated last night that if we save the iron used to make iron cutlery and household items each year, such as wash basins, our Westerlands iron reserves will increase by 40%. If we use the iron saved to make armor, longswords, short knives, daggers, and iron arrowheads, the price of weapons will decrease by 30%. The entire hall was silent, not a sound to be heard. Regarding calculations, everyone trusted Grand Maester Potter. Duke Tywin's gaze slowly swept across the entire hall, incomparably majestic. His vassals and knights remained silent. Does anyone have any opinions or anything they don't understand? Speak up. Tywin was already clear on which was more expensive, making chopsticks out of wood or using iron for cutlery. He had carefully considered this decision. Most commoners cannot afford armor in times of war, and even their swords are rusty and of poor quality because weapons are too expensive. Steel is too precious. And wood, the Westerlands are full of mountains and primeval forests. Duke, if the manufacture and sale of iron cutlery are stopped, what will we use to cut vegetables at home? I think chopsticks can't cut meat, said Earl Lefford of Golden Tooth. He spoke the minds of everyone. The kitchen knives used by chefs will be uniformly manufactured by the blacksmiths of Casterly Rock, and rationed to the vassal territories. I will ensure that every household has at least 2 kitchen knives. From now on, whether it's roast meat or toast, after 6 months, no one will be allowed to have 1 knife plus 1 fork per person. Only the meat and vegetables should be cut in the kitchen, then put on a plate, and brought to the table for eating with chopsticks. 6 months later, all families in the Westerlands will use chopsticks. All iron cutlery in the family, including the Lannister family of Casterly Rock, must be handed over. Your iron cutlery can be exchanged for snow salt. I'll say it again, we must reserve more iron and use it sparingly. From now on, except for weapons and armor, all iron plates, iron basins, and iron crafts used in daily life are not allowed to be made of steel, all must be replaced with wood. Does anyone have any objections? Speak up. Everyone looked at each other, feeling that they needed to go home and digest it. Iron cutlery, which had been used for generations, was being changed. Many people felt awkward, strange, and unreal, but no one stood up to object. Because Duke Tywin demanded the same of himself and did not have any privileges. Gregor couldn't help but admire Duke Tywin. The Duke was invited by the king at the age of 20 due to his outstanding political talent, and he became the hand of the king, governing national affairs for 20 years. No one dared to question his ability to govern the country. Replacing iron with wood would allow the Westerlands to lead other kingdoms in iron reserves. When the price of weapons comes down and the commoners of the Westerlands can have good weapons, whose soldiers will be more combat effective in the event of war. Although Gregor came from a world with a high level of civilization, he was really just a greenhorn when it came to planning national affairs. When he first used chopsticks, he didn't think about replacing a large amount of iron with cheap chopsticks that were not worth mentioning. The Great Wick Island of the Iron Islands is rich in iron ore and does indeed force the Westerlands to raise prices every year. Okay, that's all for the government affairs. Today, I want to specifically mention Sir Gregor Clegane, who has brought these changes to the Westerlands. He has made a very special contribution to the changes in the Westerlands, and I believe he will have more good inventions and technologies in the future. For a knight with outstanding contributions, I want to reward him specially today. Gregor stepped out of the ranks, respectful. Sir Gregor, you are my most loyal general, and your loyalty is beyond doubt. I am amazed that you are blessed by the light of the 7 gods. Let us thank the 7 gods. You are also my most valiant general, invincible and victorious in every battle. No one in the Westerlands or even the entire kingdom can match you. This time, I want to reward you with a large territory, and at the same time, I want to reward you with the best, most precious, and most beloved thing I have. Thank you, Duke. Gregor knelt on one knee, right fist clenched on his left chest. My daughter, Jane Westerling. Duke Tywin took Jane's hand beside him. You have also reached the age of marriage. Today, I want to betroth you to Sir Gregor Clegane. I hope you will agree. Tywin's words were couched as a request, but his tone was unquestionable. As soon as these words were spoken, the entire hall became so quiet that it seemed as if no one existed. Jane's head exploded with a bang. She saw the Duke's mouth opening and closing, but she couldn't hear what the Duke was saying at all. Then, Jane felt like everything was floating. All the light, shadows, colors, and sounds were changing in a surreal way. She seemed to hear her father, Earl Gawain's voice, dreamlike and unreal. Duke, you are Jane's father. Your betrothal of Jane is a great honor to House Westerling. Jane felt herself soften, unable to sit still on the chair. She felt herself collapsing, and then all the light, shadows, and sounds disappeared. She fell into endless darkness, feeling her body sinking, without end. Chapter 52. Everyone in the hall saw Jane's fainting. Duke Tywin's expression remained unchanged. Earl Gavin trotted to Jane's side, his face full of smiles. My apologies, Duke, Sir Gregor, everyone. My daughter is a little weak and can't handle excitement. When she gets excited, she tends to feel faint. It's just happiness, nothing serious, she'll be fine soon. Amidst Earl Gavin's rambling, he helped the Lannister maids to escort Jane Westerling out of the hall and into the Maester's tower. Duke Tywin's gaze swept across the hall, and silence descended once more. Sir Gregor, my daughter Jane might have some minor health issues. Duke, Gregor thanks you for the marriage proposal. House Clegane is eternally grateful, Gregor said quickly. He sensed that Duke Tywin was hinting at a gentle refusal, but that wouldn't do. Jane, as a wife, is skilled, beautiful, and unparalleled. What's the point of being a man if you don't marry such a woman? Even though she fainted upon hearing about the engagement, he couldn't let her go. Once they were married, feelings could be cultivated slowly. In the hall, all the young unmarried nobles felt sorry for Jane, though perhaps they were feeling sorry for themselves. There were no noble women or ladies-in-waiting in the hall. The Westerlands Administrative Hall was different from the Red Keep's throne room in Winterfell. In the throne room, during each administrative session, there were not only hundreds of high-ranking nobles and generals but also many noble women and ladies-in-waiting. However, in the Westerlands Administrative Hall, Tywin did not allow vassals to bring their wives and daughters to participate in any administrative matters. Today, Jane Westerling was an exception. Her presence beside Duke Tywin was itself an administrative matter for him today. The earls, barons, and knights all had complex feelings, a mixture of envy, jealousy, and hatred. Jane Westerling was unparalleled in beauty and talent. She had been picky in her choices, aiming too high, but in the end, she was marrying the most infamous Mountain of the Westerlands. It was well known that the Mountain had married 2 wives, both of whom had died from accidentally breaking their necks while walking. But whether they were tortured to death or actually broke their necks, the nobles had their own ideas. In the hall, dozens of nobles, young and old, were filled with regret. They had bet with the Mountain, wagering that Jane would marry Adon Sarwyck rather than the Mountain. After the betting started yesterday, more and more people joined in. In the end, except for Sweetmouth Ralph and a few others who were drunk and slurring, everyone else bet on Sir Adon winning. Adon Sarwyck himself had placed a large bet, Goldleaf Bay within the Silver Hill lands. Goldleaf Bay was located on the western edge of Silver Hill, close to the Clegane territory, and had not yet been mined. Gregor, driven by greed, had investigated and discovered that Goldleaf Bay was rich in gold. However, Goldleaf Bay was a small area, just a corner of Silver Hill's rich gold mine. The stones used to build Clegane's keep came from the stone quarry west of Goldleaf Bay. After quarrying the stones, they could dig a hole downwards, make a turn, and enter the mining area of Goldleaf Bay. Whether Adon bet or not, Goldleaf Bay was a piece of fat meat in Gregor's mouth, and he was determined to have it. If he won the bet, he could mine it legitimately and openly. If he lost the bet, or if Adon didn't take the bait and refused to bet with Gregor, Gregor would still mine it, but he would do it at night and sleep during the day. 1 red heart, 2 hands prepared. With this bet, Gregor had won big. Goldleaf Bay had become a permanent territory of House Clegane. In the future, if he was short on funds, he could dig a hole on the edge of Goldleaf Bay, make a turn, and enter the Sarwyck family's gold mine, stealing a few bites easily and conveniently. Adon Sarwyck stood in the ranks of the knights, his face ashen. He was heartbroken about losing Goldleaf Bay, but even more heartbroken about losing Jane Westerling. Last night, he had a brief encounter with Jane in the Lannister dining hall. Although they only stood and exchanged a few words, they understood each other and sensed each other's feelings through their passionate eyes. Returning to his guest room last night, Adon couldn't sleep all night, partly due to the alcohol and partly due to Jane. Earl Gavin hadn't brought Jane along on his previous visit to propose marriage, so Adon hadn't seen Jane in person, only heard about her beauty and talent. After meeting her at this ceremony, he realized that fame didn't compare to reality. Had he known Jane was so beautiful and charming, he would have persuaded his parents to agree to the marriage last time. For a passionate young man, a girl's beauty, when strong to a certain extent, could make him overlook her family's shortcomings. Moreover, House Sarwyck was never short of money. Hey! A strong noble youth beside him lightly bumped Adon. You made me lose 50 gold dragons to the Mountain, you son of a bitch. The one cursing him was Lyle Craighall from Craighall. House Craighall was known for being strong and robust. Sir Lyle Craighall was the second son of the Earl of Craighall. Among his 3 brothers, he was the tallest and strongest, nicknamed Strong Boar. His coat of arms was a black and white boar on a brown background, which was also his family's sigil. Although Strong Boar was cursing Adon, it was only in lip movements. In Duke Tywin's administrative hall, no one dared to shout and curse at another person. Adon's mood was already at its lowest. If it weren't for being in the administrative hall, he would have already drawn his sword and stabbed it into Strong Boar's stomach. But who would dare to act recklessly while Duke Tywin was holding an administrative meeting? No one dared. Adon suppressed his anger and immediately mouthed a challenge, "Fool, a duel. Get lost." Strong Boar responded angrily. "I'm heartbroken about the 50 gold dragons, I don't want your life." "But I want your life," Adon said, his anger soaring. "All right, I'll grant you your wish." Strong Boar's personality was already volatile. Duke Tywin sat in a high position, above 7 steps, overlooking everyone in the hall. "Sir Lyle," Tywin called out. The voice was not loud, but it sounded like a thunderclap in Strong Boar's ears. Being named by Duke Tywin was not a good thing. Lyle Craighall quickly stepped out of the ranks, placing his right fist on his left chest to salute his liege lord. "What are you saying?" Tywin's pale green eyes calmly looked at Strong Boar. Strong Boar was so frightened that cold sweat broke out on his back. His father, Earl Craighall, was also anxious, his eyes wide, his gaze like angry flames directed at his ignorant son. "Duke, I was just expressing my joy for Sir Gregor and Miss Jane's engagement. I was wondering what kind of congratulatory gift I should give Sir Gregor and Miss Jane that would be worthy of their nobility." "Oh. Sir Adon, was Lyle discussing the gift with you just now?" Adon Sarwyck had no choice but to stand out, placing his right fist on his left chest to salute his liege lord. "Yes, Duke." "Well then, since you young people are so enthusiastic and delighted, then Sir Adon, you should set an example. My daughter Jane is getting engaged to Sir Gregor today, how much of a congratulatory gift are you Silverhill Sarwicks prepared to give?" Adon's mouth was dry, and his chest felt like it was on fire, hot and uncomfortable. He forced a smile. "Duke, Silverhill will give Miss Jane a string of pearl necklaces, 2 ruby bracelets, He glanced at Duke Tywin, feeling that the Duke seemed displeased. He was setting a standard for all the nobles in the Wester lands. Adon's scalp went numb. A coral agate tree, a pair of jade emerald bowls, and 200 gold dragons. Several boxes of fragrant silk, rouge, and powder. Chapter 53. Gregor looked at Adu Shalot, his eyes full of gratitude and appreciation. But in Ado's eyes, all of this was humiliation. Humiliation? Yes, this was actually the highest level of humiliation. Since he had transmigrated to this rather tragic world and become a noble, if he was going to play, he would play at a higher level, and humiliation was no exception. 200 gold dragons as a gift was already a lot, this was an engagement, not a wedding. Compared to beautiful jade jewelry, Gregor preferred gold dragons. Jewelry still needed to be converted into cash, while gold dragons were directly currency, much more convenient to use. Adu Shalot was truly generous this time. Pearls, rubies, emeralds, gold dragons, silk, and rouge were all present. Of course, Gregor was very grateful for Duke Tywin's assist. He deserved it. Although it was Tywin who thought of using wooden utensils as a substitute for ironware, a high-level political strategy, from his chopsticks, without Gregor's chopsticks, Tywin would not have been inspired. Gregor's original intention was just for the nobles to use it for fun, a private indulgence. Who knew that after just one night, Duke Tywin and a well-educated maester with excellent math skills would shut themselves in a room and come up with a high-level policy of replacing iron with wood, which was amazing. Gregor had to admire that old man Tywin was indeed very capable. Gregor's gaze shifted to the face of the stout pig, Lyle Craighall. This guy lost 50 gold dragons to him, generous. 50 gold dragons was equivalent to 500,000 in Earth's civilization. In his memory, Gregor remembered very clearly that King Robert invited Eddard Stark to leave the north and travel south, camping by the beach at the Red Fork. Robert started a gambling game and wanted Eddard Stark to join in. Eddard Stark, as the Duke of the North, could only offer a maximum of 10 gold dragons to gamble with. Even if Robert asked his treasurer to count Eddard's private purse, there were only 50 gold dragons and some small copper stars. Only in the Westerlands were these nobles truly wealthy. The stout pig Lyle Craighall lost 50 gold dragons to Gregor, and Gregor nodded to him, expressing his gratitude. Gregor was willing to send out many similar thanks and would not be stingy. The highest level of humiliation was when others hated you to the core but were forced to smile and return your greeting. The original intention this time was to deceive Adu Shalot into falling for it, to seize the rich golden tooth of House Shalot. He was very happy that Adu fully assisted, simply opened a gambling game, and allowed the nobles of the Westerlands to openly participate, allowing Gregor to make a fortune. Without needing to calculate, Gregor had already figured out that this gold dragon gambling game made a net profit of 321 gold dragons. Dozens of nobles and young knights were involved. 321 gold dragons, converted to Earth's value system, would be 3,210,000 RMB. Of course, this amount of money still couldn't compare to the real tycoons in Earth's civilization. After all, the rich and advanced civilizations were truly more numerous and more extravagant. Gregor was very satisfied with Ado's gift money, but Duke Tywin seemed dissatisfied with Ado's gift money. Gregor, have you recorded Sir Ado's gifts? I have, my lord. If he's missing even one item, Gregor, you go to Lady Tyget in the Silver Hall. Duke Tywin was solemn and serious. He was not joking, and Tywin never joked. Yes, my lord. Sir Ado's face immediately turned red. This was naked humiliation. Sir Lyle, I know you are not the heir to your family and have no right to make any statements about your family's gifts. You are not the eldest son, and the land and wealth of your family will not belong to you, so how could you discuss the matter of gifts with Sir Adu? Duke Tywin's calm tone was already an indication of his anger. Lyle's father, Count Craig Hall, knew things were bad. His son's lie had been exposed by Tywin. But he understood Tywin's nature and had to shut his mouth, not daring to interrupt or express any opinion. Lyle stammered, unable to speak. Lyle, do you admit that you lied? Yes, my lord. Lyle knelt on one knee, uneasy. Adu Shalot mentally killed Lyle 17 or 18 times. Since things had come to this, he had to kneel on one knee and take the initiative to admit to Duke Tywin that he had lied. Duke Tywin said, "Today is my daughter's engagement, and I have announced the reform and implementation of 3 major government affairs, so I am in a good mood, so I will not punish you two for the time being, but I will remember this debt, and if you commit it again in the future, you will be severely punished together." He stood up, his gaze overlooking the entire audience. "I'm going to the Maester's Tower to see my daughter. If she is well enough, gentlemen, the engagement of my youngest daughter will be held here this afternoon. If you haven't brought gifts, you can write gift slips first. Sir Gregor, do you have any suggestions?" Gregor admired Tywin's straightforwardness in asking for gifts. This behavior, which would be condemned as shameless in Earth's civilization, was a matter of course for Duke Tywin. Gregor decided to learn from it and surpass him. "Duke, I can't wait to be engaged to Miss Jane," Gregor said solemnly. When do you plan to get married after the engagement?" Gregor always believed that Duke Tywin's cunning was like his political ability, all innate. Poor Jane, who didn't know how many times she would cry in the toilet. In about a month. When the Westerland General's military whistle training method is over, Miss Jane and I will get married." "All right, since the time isn't long, Jane doesn't need to go back to Casterly Rock. She will live in Casey until she marries you. After the marriage, I will completely hand her over to you and let you take her back to Clegane's Keep." "Yes, thank you, Duke." Gregor said solemnly, "Duke, you said you would reward me with a piece of land." "Right." Tywin waved his hand, indicating to his vassals that the political meeting was over, then walked down the steps and said to Gregor as he walked, "Your new territory, starting from the existing border of Clegane's land, south to the edge of the Swift family's land in Cornfield, and east to the junction of the Shalot family's Silver Hill Mountains, all belong to you. The northern and western boundaries remain unchanged. Your population will increase by 20 households. Let your stewards take the household registration books down and let those people register into the Clegane territory." "Yes, Duke." Gregor watched Duke Tywin stride out of the political hall, feeling extremely happy. It turned out that the new territory was the three-way no-man's land between the Swift family of Cornfield, the Shalot family of Silver Hall, and the Clegane family of Clegane's Keep. Don't look down on these lands, they are full of rocks, barren slopes, streams, thorns, and weeds, but the area is very wide. In this way, the gold mine mountains of the Silver Hall Shalot family are just outside the border of the Clegane family. Long border lines, everywhere, you can dig a hole in the ground, and then make a turn to enter the gold mining area, just like a burrowing rat, making the Shalott family impossible to defend against. The new territory seems to have no economic value, and it is not easy to plant barren slopes and wild stones, but in Gregor's eyes, they are all gold mines. Gregor felt very happy. As for Jane crying in the toilet, well, under the rules of this world, the mountain has her reasonably and legally, and this is not a forced dominance. Moreover, feelings can also be cultivated. Chapter 54. Night. 2 guards from Casterly Rock stood at Miss Jane's door. Gregor walked up, and the 2 guards, their hands on their sword hilts, blocked his path. "Get out of the way," Gregor said, with a very polite tone. "I'm sorry, my lord, but the lady said she's not seeing anyone right now." "Get out of the way." Gregor spat out the words, his eyes bulging. The 2 guards hesitated, and one of them said, "My lord, please wait a moment, I'll go in and ask." Gregor reached out and grabbed the guard's chest, exerting slight force, lifting him into the air. "Get out of the way." He breathed hot air onto the guard's face, and with a wave of his hand, the guard flew away. Thump! The guard crashed to the ground several feet away. Gregor tossed him as if he were a small toy. Fortunately, the guard landed on his back and buttocks, and the area was even grassy. The other guard was so frightened that he reached out and drew a small portion of his sword, but Gregor merely glared at him, and he couldn't draw the sword any further. "Don't draw your sword. If you really draw it, you'll only get it halfway out. I can kill you twice over with a punch and a kick," Gregor sincerely reminded the guard. The guard was speechless and dared not draw his sword again, his whole body as stiff as a statue. The guard who had fallen got up, his head spinning. He had screamed in the air, thinking he would splatter his brains, but who knew he would be so lucky as to land on the soft grass. Gregor was crude but meticulous, and would not kill Jane's guards for no reason, and also tried to minimize the harm to them. Now Jane was already his betrothed. A fiancé visiting his fiancée was perfectly justifiable. He didn't have the cultivation to be a gentleman who couldn't see his fiancée. For a rogue, he would create a reason even if there wasn't one, let alone when he was in the right. The betrothal ceremony this afternoon had been very successful. Gregor and Jane sat side by side, received the blessings of the septon, offered many pigs, cattle, sheep, and fruits to the unfamiliar 7 gods, received the anointment of the sacred oil representing purity again, and then received the blessings of the great and small nobles, and received a large amount of gift money and gift money notes. Lord Tywin had invited the nobles of the entire realm to Casterly Rock, only telling them that he would take Jane as his daughter, and did not say that he would betroth Sir Gregor and hold a betrothal ceremony the next day. The gifts these nobles brought were not enough to cope with the betrothal gifts, so those who had gifts sent them, and those who couldn't send them were not embarrassed, so they signed gift money notes first, and then sent servants to deliver the gifts to Casterly Rock later. After the betrothal ceremony, Jane became Gregor's legal betrothed. As long as a good day was chosen a month later, Gregor could return to Clegane's Keep with the beauty in his arms from Casterly Rock. As soon as the betrothal ceremony ended, Jane said she was feeling a little unwell and returned to her room alone, declining visits from everyone, including her father, Lord Gawain. In this world, women have no autonomy over their marriages, and everything must give way to family interests. Love is a luxury that the vast majority of people cannot enjoy. Even princesses, princes, and even the king himself, under the premise of huge political interests, love will become a victim of political marriage. In the face of interests, interests are paramount, and everything else takes a back seat. For Lord Gawain and House Westerling, the greatest interest was to befriend their liege lord, Lord Tywin Lannister. The greatest loss was to be at odds with their liege lord, Lord Tywin Lannister. Lord Tywin's betrothal, no matter how unsightly it looked, Lord Gawain could not refuse, and Jane could not refuse either. They couldn't afford the cost of being at odds with their liege lord, Lord Tywin Lannister. Lord Tywin's willingness to take Jane as his daughter was the greatest honor and political benefit for House Westerling. Lord Gawain and Jane accepted the honor and political benefit, and had to accept Lord Tywin's betrothal, otherwise they would be at odds with their liege lord. On the surface, everyone was a winner. House Westerling was a winner, Lord Tywin was a winner, Sir Gregor was a winner, and the biggest loser was only one person, Jane Westerling. Gregor bent down and walked into Jane's room, holding a delicate brocade box in his hand. Jane's petite body trembled when she saw Gregor. She was afraid. 15-year-old Jane was still a young girl, while Gregor was almost as old as her father, a middle-aged man in his 30s. In this world, men and women marry early, in their teens. They don't need to get a marriage certificate, they only need to go to the September and ask the High Septon to preside over the marriage and record it, and there is no family planning. Gregor said softly, Jane. His gentleness made Jane's body tremble slightly again. Can you do me a small favor? What is it? The little girl's voice was pitiful. A little lamb facing a drooling dire wolf with bared fangs. Can I ask you, to do me a small favor? Jane nodded subconsciously. Even in her fear, she was still so beautiful, without affecting her charm in the slightest. Flowers in dew and sunshine, in moonlight and silence, show beauty in any environment, different beauty. Gregor squatted down and gently placed the brocade box on Jane's lap. The little girl was tearful, and her lips turned grey. She was under tremendous pressure. Being alone in a room with a monster like the mountain put even strong men under great pressure. My lord, I am willing to give you all the gift money, pearls and jade, can you annul the engagement? Gregor looked at Jane's rapid breathing, helpless eyes and fearful expression, and he said softly, Jane, I don't lack money. Sir Adam set up a public gambling game, bullying me for being poor, wanting to humiliate me. I asked Sir Kevin's knight to pass on a message, and relying on Sir Kevin's word as a guarantee, I took all of Sir Adam's bets. I won more than 300 gold dragons, and Sir Kevin also made a net profit of 50 guarantee gold. I don't lack money anymore, but I lack a lady, a wife, a woman. Silence. After a while, Jane said softly, Sir Gregor, you deliberately gambled with Adam, and asked Lord Kevin to guarantee your gambling money, because you already knew that the Duke would betroth you the next day. Lord Kevin is a very cautious person, but he still dared to guarantee you, which shows that Lord Kevin also knew the secret of the betrothal. This is a carefully designed game, perhaps from the moment the Raven arrived at my home in Casterly Rock. Have you always wanted to marry me? Jane's words made Gregor more determined to marry her as his wife, a woman who combines beauty and talent. It is better to marry the wrong one than to let her go. Miss Jane, maybe the 7 gods know the truth. But I'm more concerned about the cat in the brocade box now. Gregor opened the brocade box. Inside the brocade box was a snow-white cat, spotless, with no stray hairs on its body, of pure quality, and expensive. When Jane saw the cat, her eyes immediately lit up, with a heartfelt love. It was her nature, unable to be controlled by reason in an instant. A Lysini cat. Jane said in a surprised and delighted voice. Yes, but it hasn't eaten anything for several days. Jane, can you do me a favor, help me raise this poor Lysini cat and save its life? You like cats too? Jane said in an unbelievable voice. She reached out and picked up the cat, her heart melting into the cat's amber eyes. My God, it has a fever, we have to find medicine for it quickly. I don't know what to do. I know, my mother used to raise a Lysini cat. I specially learned medical skills to save the Lysini cat at home. Jane forgot everything. The snow-white jade-like cat's life was in danger, and it grabbed her heart. Sir Gregor, we have to hurry to the citadel. Okay, Miss Jane. But Archmaester Poliver doesn't know how to treat it, I've already looked for the maester. I know. Jane's voice became louder. Gregor picked up Jane and the cat together. Jane was as light as a feather in his arms. Miss Jane, I can walk faster if I carry you. Gregor strode out the door, one step exceeding 3 steps of ordinary people. Chapter 55. Earl Gavin rushed over with his family guards, only to see Gregor carrying his daughter, Jinna, out of the room. He was furious. This devil was already so presumptuous and bullying towards his daughter on their engagement day. What would it be like after they were married? Although Earl Gavin was afraid of the mountain, and the 6 family guards were outwardly angry but inwardly uneasy, they were within Duke Tywin's main castle, protected by the hospitality afforded to guests. If the mountain dared to act violently towards them, it would be both impolite and a desecration of Duke Tywin's dignity. Therefore, their courage was several times greater than when they were 10 miles north of Casterly Rock. Earl Gavin mustered his courage and strode forward, about to sternly question him, but he noticed that his daughter was not crying or making a fuss, and was very well behaved in Gregor's arms. She didn't seem to be wronged, nor was she shedding tears of grief as he had imagined. Earl Gavin had been startled when he heard that the mountain had gone to find his daughter. Was this beast trying to get rough so soon after the engagement? Anxious, he hurriedly left the Earl's seat where he had been drinking, called his family guards from the ordinary soldiers' tables outside, and they all rushed over with their weapons. No matter how fierce the mountain was, Earl Gavin had to stop him if he tried to bully his daughter on their engagement day. Although Earl Gavin's martial skills were ordinary, he was a knight who had undergone rigorous training and participated in real battles. Especially in the Duke's castle, his courage and boldness were particularly enhanced. "Jinna, are you all right?" Earl Gavin glared at the mountain and said softly to his daughter. "I'm fine, father. We're going to the Maester's tower." "We're fine." Jinna looked up at her father, and then her gaze fell to her arms. Only then did Gavin see a ball of snow-white fluff in Jinna's arms. Judging from the shadow, it seemed to be a Lysini cat. The thing didn't move, and his daughter was protecting it with her arms, so Earl Gavin couldn't be sure that it was a Lysini cat. Before he could react, the mountain had already walked past them like the wind, leaving behind a sentence, "Earl Gavin, we're going to save a life first, and we'll come back with Jinna to offer you a toast later." Earl Gavin and his indignant guards were bewildered. The mountain didn't call him father-in-law, but addressed him as Earl Gavin as before, only his tone was much softer. The mountain was always rude, vulgar, and barbaric. Earl Gavin didn't care about the small detail of changing his address to father-in-law. As long as his daughter wasn't being bullied. Jinna's two guards came up to meet them, and Earl Gavin was asking if Gregor had bullied his daughter when Gregor had already walked far away with Jinna, really striding like the wind. In the blink of an eye, his tall figure entered the Maester's tower. Footsteps sounded, and 5 people rushed out of another corridor, all of them sturdy and strong. What they held in their hands were not swords or spears, but long poles with forked ends and nets, made of iron. Earl Gavin and his guards had never seen such a thing before. "Earl, where is Sir Gregor? Where is he?" Earl Gavin pointed to the Maester's tower. "Where is Miss Jinna?" "She's with him." "Quick, after them." A strong man was taken aback. The 5 men ran away, but after a few steps, they realized that Earl Gavin and his guards had not moved. These 5 men were the 5 centurions of Duke Tywin's cavalry, and they had been ordered by Duke Tywin to stop the mountain from getting rough with Jinna. "Earl, come with us. The more people we have to deal with the mountain, the better," a centurion said. "Sir Gregor and Miss Jinna are fine." They're fine." "Fine." The 5 centurions who had come on a mission stopped together and asked in unison. We saw that Sir Gregor didn't bully Miss Jinna. They went to the Maester's tower to save a life." Save a life. It was hard for the 5 centurions not to say it in unison. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. "Well, let's go to the Maester's tower together," Earl Gavin said. "Okay, let's go together." It turned out that the 5 centurions of the cavalry had heard that Gregor had come to find Jinna while drunk, and they were all startled. The beast couldn't hold back for a moment, but this was in Duke Tywin's castle. The guests were still drinking and feasting, and he went to bully Miss Jinna. How could this be allowed? This was a stain on Duke Tywin's reputation. They hurriedly reported to Duke Tywin, and upon receiving Duke Tywin's order, they immediately came to arrest the mountain. In Duke Tywin's mansion, not to mention the mountain, anyone who dared to mess around, even his own son Jaime Lannister, would be severely punished. The long poles in the hands of the centurions had a special name, mountain pole. This iron mountain pole, with a forked end and a net, was the special weapon that Duke Tywin had ordered Grand Maester Potter to research specifically to control the mountain. It was named after the mountain. The mountain often had headaches, so he drank poppy milk. If he drank too much poppy milk, he would sometimes fall into hallucinations and mess around. In addition to poppy milk, the mountain was increasingly unable to control himself when he drank too much alcohol, and he clearly had a tendency to go berserk. Once, he almost beat a distinguished guest from the Riverlands to death in Duke Tywin's dining room. In order to prevent him from hurting people while drunk, and to prevent him from hurting people while hallucinating from drinking too much poppy milk, Duke Tywin gave Grand Maester Potter a death order: he must design a special weapon that could control the mountain but would not harm him. As a result, the forked long pole with a net was designed. This special weapon, after repeated targeted training, could only deal with the mountain when he was unarmed and drunk, or when he was delirious from drinking too much poppy milk. When the mountain was sober, these 5 poles would be grabbed and broken by him as soon as they were extended. The mountain pole is, so far, the only special weapon that has been proven to have a significant effect on controlling the mountain. Earl Gavin and his party quickly arrived at the foot of the tower, and they heard a loud bang from the top floor of the Maester's tower, followed by the sound of something shattering completely, accompanied by Jinna's exclamation, "Sir Gregor, why did you kick down the door of the pharmacy?" The old potter is too stingy. He locked the pharmacy door even though we're celebrating our wedding. His dog apprentice isn't here either. Damn it, I must clean them up after we're done. No, don't blame anyone. Today is our engagement day. Everyone is happy and went to drink. You can't go and make trouble for the maester and his students. But our cat. Sire, they wouldn't know we would come to the pharmacy at this time. Humph. Gregor's fierce voice said, all right, I'll listen to my fiancé this time and spare them. Damn it. If any other idlers dare to come up here to disturb us, I'll kill them all. Don't say that, Sir Gregor, Jinna said softly, put me down and let me find the medicine quickly. Then, the light came on at the top of the maester's tower. Earl Gavin and the others looked at each other and stopped. The Beast Mountain does listen to advice when he loses his temper. Everyone in the West knows that he only listens to Duke Tywin. But now, it seems there is one more person. Chapter 56. If you want to control someone, give them what they want. This art of manipulation isn't exclusive to Lord Tywin, Gregor also understands this principle. To win Jane's favor, give her what she desires. Jane's primary desire is for Gregor to break off the engagement. If Gregor were to break off the engagement, Jane would be overjoyed, but it would displease Gregor, making it an incorrect choice to be eliminated. Then, settle for the second, third, or fourth best thing she wants. The key is to discover what Jane desires most. Trust has echoes, but money speaks. 1 gold dragon. Gregor only spent a single gold dragon to have Sweetmouth Ralph extract a detailed profile of Jane's life. It didn't include the height, weight, and measurements data of Earth's civilization, instead, it contained Jane's personality, hobbies, and talents. For a STEM guy, after analyzing the small data of Jane's lifestyle, the second thing Jane wanted after breaking off the engagement was a young noble knight, Adam Sarrett, but what stirred the heart of a young girl the most was a Lysane cat. When Jane's mother, as the daughter of a merchant, married up to Lord Gawain, she brought a Lysane cat as part of her dowry. A year later, Jane was born, and the Lysane cat became her playmate as she learned to speak. Thus, the Lysane cat accompanied Jane through her childhood and adolescence. When she had just turned 15, her Lysane cat went to heaven. This Lysane cat gave Jane affection exceeding that of a family member. After the Lysane cat passed away, Jane was never able to release herself from the emotions tied to the Lysane cat, and she had a deep and unforgettable longing for the Lysane cat in another world. Although Lysane cats from across the narrow sea could be bought in Lannisport if one was willing to spend the money, Jane's family was poor and impoverished, and her father, Lord Gawain, had to sell land again. Furthermore, purchasing a Lysane cat was already a huge expense for House Westerling, and it also required a certain amount of luck. Merchants had to bring the cats from across the narrow sea, and you had to act before others did. Generally, Lysane cats were pre-ordered after nobles and merchants agreed upon and prepaid a deposit. Who would tell Gregor's knight, Sweetmouth Ralph, about Jane's life preferences for a single gold dragon? It was the guy who blocked Gregor from entering Jane's room but was casually tossed aside by Gregor. For Sweetmouth Ralph, extracting all of Jane's life details for a single gold dragon was effortless. He excelled at this, his sweet mouth like honey, touching people's hearts. For Gregor, it was all a routine. Before he transmigrated, he was a meme master in QQ groups and a trickster king active in WeChat groups. Besides, money is the best debater in any world, eloquent and without exception. With a single gold dragon, Sweetmouth Ralph easily extracted information from the guard beside Jane. And that Lysane cat came from a noble family in Casterly Rock, a family named House Broom. The current head of House Broom is very famous. He is Sandor Clegane, the Hound's sword instructor and also Gregor Clegane's first sword teacher. He teaches martial arts to the 1500 Lannister soldiers in Casterly Rock, whether cavalry or infantry. This knight's name is Benlaunt Broom. Benlaunt Broom's family has a Lysane cat that they recently bought, which is Lady Broom's favorite. How does that saying go? Everything happens for a reason. Gregor is a very proactive person. Gregor forcibly bought this Lysane cat from Lady Broom, using his engagement as an excuse to demand a congratulatory gift, and he even went to their door to demand it. Then, Sweetmouth Ralph used crooked methods to intoxicate the cat, and Gregor, smelling of alcohol, acted according to plan. When Gregor and Jane slowly came down from the maester's tower, Lord Gawain, who was waiting below, widened his eyes. The beast was still holding the beauty, and the beauty was holding the kitten. It was a very harmonious scene. The family guards remained silent. The 5 centurions sent by Lord Tywin had disappeared, they had gone back to drink. Since Gregor had not forced himself upon Miss Jane, they absolutely dared not provoke Gregor. Even though they were relatives of the Lannister bloodline, they were still Gregor's subordinates if anything happened. This evil beast, Gregor, was only to be befriended, not antagonized. Since nothing had happened, they naturally withdrew. Jane. Lord Gawain's voice was filled with complex emotions. The obedient daughter he had raised for 15 years was about to take the Clegane name. As Jane's father, Lord Gawain's feelings were very complicated. Father, Jane noticed Lord Gawain and several family guards only then. She seemed to have forgotten everything and spoke with some surprise. What happened? Why are you all here? Lord Gawain felt embarrassed. Had this daughter's heart already turned towards a demonic beast so quickly? But he knew the reason. He saw the Lysane cat, a snow-white jade-like little creature with amber eyes. Sir Gregor, please put me down, Jane said softly. Yes. Jane realized that when she spoke to Sir Gregor with a gentle and persuasive tone, he seemed to listen and was able to better soothe his impetuous emotions. Gregor's arms were as hard and strong as steel, but Jane's fear of this body seemed to have disappeared. This was something she wasn't even aware of. Blame it on this Lysane cat. Jane called it Angela. You. Lord Gawain pointed to the top of the Maester's tower. Oh, Angela was sick, and Sir Gregor and I went to the Maester's pharmacy to find some medicine to feed it. Angela is much better now. Would you like to touch it? Its temperature is under control, and its eyes have come to life. Gregor burped with alcohol and expressed his agreement, praising Jane's medical skills in a time of crisis. He only hoped that Angela wouldn't actually get sick from eating those colorful medicinal liquids that he didn't understand at all. Catering to her preferences had a significant effect. Jane hugged Angela and entered her room without distraction. Gregor asked her to help him take care of Angela, and Jane gladly agreed. She was happy to help Gregor with this favor. Jane didn't trust such a boorish knight to take care of Angela. Lord Gawain sighed deeply in his heart. Even a fool could see that this was a little trick Gregor used to deceive his daughter's heart. Jane was very smart, and it was difficult for others to deceive her. She wasn't a fool, but she was a woman. At this time, Jane was even a little more foolish than a fool. Under Gregor's rude invitation, Lord Gawain and the family guards all went to drink with Gregor. Jane returned to her room alone, closed the door, and made a comfortable brocade nest for Angela. Miss Jane. A voice was very polite, full of apology. Jane was startled and turned around in surprise, seeing a courteous knight standing in front of her bedroom door. Chapter 57. Who are you? Jenny subconsciously adopted a defensive posture. The young knight possessed an extraordinary bearing, with heroic sword-like eyebrows and a scholarly air between his eyes, clearly from a noble and aristocratic family. However, Jenny didn't recognize him. Miss Jenny, please take a look at this. The knight produced a brooch, bearing the Westerling family crest. Are you a friend of Sir Adam Charlotte? Yes, I am. This brooch was a token exchanged between Adam and Lord Gawain during the marriage proposal. At that time, Lord Gawain had agreed to Adam's proposal, but it was only a private promise and had not been publicly announced. Lord Gawain had not yet formally sought Jenny's opinion, and furthermore, since Lord Tywin was Jenny's adoptive father, Lord Gawain had not yet had the chance to tell Lord Tywin about it. I'm sorry, Sir, I am already betrothed to Gregor Clegane. Please convey my apologies to Sir Adam. I will have my father exchange the tokens back. Miss Jenny, Sir Adam Charlotte is waiting for you at the mountaintop watchtower. Are there no guards at the watchtower? Please rest assured, miss. In these times of peace, the watchtower hasn't been manned for a long time. Tonight, the Lannister soldiers are all drinking. They won't return to the barracks without drinking. I'm sorry, knight, I cannot go to the watchtower to meet Sir Adam. Intimate relationships were prevalent among the nobles of the Seven Kingdoms. King Robert Baratheon of the Seven Kingdoms had taken a fancy to Celis Florent, a bridesmaid at his younger brother Stannis Baratheon's wedding. The two of them mingled together that very night, using the very bed Stannis had married in. Celis Florent was the cousin of Stannis Baratheon's newly wedded wife, while Robert's wife Cersei was also present. Robert still turned Celis into an intimate partner, and fathered a bastard on the wedding bed, Edric Storm. Oberyn Martell, the Red Viper of Dorne, had an affair at the age of 16 with the mistress of Sir Ormond Yeronwood, who was stationed at the most important pass on the Dornish border. The earl therefore duelled with Oberyn. Oberyn was of princely birth and only 16 years old, so Earl Euronwood decided that the duel would only draw blood, and both were injured. A few days later, Earl Ormond died of a festering wound, and people believed that Oberyn had poisoned his sword with snake venom. From then on, Oberyn was known as the Red Viper. From kings and princes to ordinary knights, many nobles and knights were willing to duel to the death in order to compete for intimacy. This was a prevailing aristocratic trend in this world. Adam Charlotte had asked one of his closest noble knight friends to deliver the message, wanting to make Jenny his intimate partner tonight. He knew that Jenny liked him and had feelings for him, which was his confidence. Jenny refused the knight's invitation and asked the young knight to leave quickly, fearing that Gregor Clegane would beat them both to death if he found out. The knight smiled slightly, not afraid of Jenny's warning. Gregor was indeed notorious, but for young knights with great strength who had never suffered any losses or been deceived, and who didn't know the dangers of the world, they all looked down on the dog Gregor. The phrase "not knowing the immensity of heaven and earth" perfectly described these noble youths from famous families, who had everything going their way, had not experienced war, and thought they were invincible. "Well, Miss Jenny, can I see your Lysiny cat? I'll just take a look and leave," the young knight said with elegant manners. Although Jenny felt it was inappropriate, she agreed to his polite request, especially since he was interested in her beloved Lysiny cat. "Knight, you'd better not touch it, it's asleep." The young knight then walked to Jenny's side, his face full of admiration. "Oh, what a beautiful and noble Lysiny cat! Only such a lovely treasure is worthy of Miss Jenny's radiance." The young man was also eloquent, praising her endlessly, making Jenny's heart flutter. "Miss Jenny, you haven't been to the mountaintop watchtower yet, have you? The night view from up there, the bright moon over the sea, is really beautiful and pleasant. It's a very, very short walk from here to the mountaintop." Lord Tywin's main castle was close to the mountaintop watchtower, and the lord's residence was also the highest point in the city, indeed very close to the mountaintop. Miss Jenny said, "Knight, I would also love to go up and see the night view, but not tonight. Please tell Sir Adam, thank you for thinking highly of me. I am already betrothed to Gregor Clegane, and that is a fact that no one can change. Miss Jenny, the mountain doesn't deserve you at all. Sir Adam is a young hero, not only is he not betrothed, but he also hasn't had any mistresses. You are the first beautiful woman he has taken a fancy to. Come with me, Gregor will be drunk tonight, and he will never know about you and Adam." Jenny shook her head firmly. "Knight, please leave quickly. I will not go to the mountaintop with you tonight." "All right." The young man squatted down and gently stroked Angela's fur, who was fast asleep. "Angela, goodbye." He slowly and reluctantly stood up, took out a snow-white handkerchief from his pocket to wipe his hands, and suddenly covered Jenny's mouth and nose with the handkerchief as she was completely unprepared. Jenny struggled desperately, but the young knight's arms were strong and powerful. He firmly controlled Jenny with one hand, and tightly covered her mouth and nose with the other, preventing her from breathing. Soon, Jenny lost consciousness. The young knight entered Jenny's bedroom and found the black cloak that had been discarded near the window. He wrapped the cloak around Jenny, bent down, and carried her on his back, as if he were carrying a cloak. He carried Jenny on his back with ease and agility, and slipped out. Tonight, all the Lannister family's servants and soldiers were reveling in drinking, singing, and dancing, not stopping until they were drunk. A small path led directly to the mountaintop, and it wasn't far. At the end of the path was the watchtower. Chapter 58. At the summit of Casterly Rock, beneath the watchtower, stood Gregor Clegane's two most formidable enforcers in the cold night wind. The most valiant executioner, Duncan, and the most loyal fanatic, Polliver. Out of 63 cavalry brothers, Gregor had designated these two to handle this minor task. The rest of the brothers were drinking and reveling in Tywin Lannister's castle, their boisterous noise drifting up in waves. Although this was a small matter, the reward was breathtaking. According to Rafford, during a drunken slip of the tongue, if they handled this matter well, they would be knighted by Gregor upon their return to Clegane's keep and granted the Clegane name. This was an honor that would make Duncan and Polliver unhesitatingly give their lives. Receiving the honor of knighthood and the Clegane surname was the most sacred glory in the hearts of these two fanatics. Polliver was willing to die to be knighted by Gregor. Now, Polliver wanted to die. He stared down the cliff, walking step by step towards the edge. For some reason, looking into the unfathomable darkness below, after staring for a short while, he felt a beautiful eye in the void gazing back at him, silently encouraging him to jump. When you gaze into the abyss also gazes into you. It was likely that Polliver deeply understood this saying. Jumping from the summit of Casterly Rock's watchtower, from a height of over 70 meters, more than 20 stories, onto the irregular, jagged rocks at the base of the mountain, would undoubtedly result in death. Polliver was a brother-in-arms that everyone except Gregor was unwilling to associate with. Neither Rafford nor Dunson, including the quick-witted scribe, liked to deal with him. Rafford valued elegant demeanor in killing, Dunson valued instant kill, while Polliver valued fragmentary art. For example, for a problem that could be solved with one knife strike, he always liked to use 17 or 18, leaving behind scattered limbs and flesh, stained with blood. But the more there were, the happier and more excited he became, his eyes even glowing green. He was not only cruel to his enemies but also to himself. When he was in high spirits, he also liked to play suicide games. Before every drinking revelry, or before going to war, or before handling a task, Gregor would say to him, "Don't stare at anything, don't self-harm, don't commit suicide." 3 prohibitions, and then an additional sentence, "Got it?" As long as Polliver answered that he got it, the problem was solved. He would firmly remember Gregor's words and execute them completely. In Polliver's eyes, Gregor was a super idol. There was a chilling light in Polliver's eyes, and the skin on the right side of his face twitched from time to time, as if he had a slight case of spasms, and a neurotic temperament radiated from him. "Polliver, what are you doing?" Dunson shouted, his voice nonchalant. "I want to jump down," Polliver said. "Jump later," Dunson said with a slight smile. "I want to jump down now." Polliver stood on the edge of the cliff, the wind blowing his clothes, and he would fall off the cliff if he was not careful. "Dunson, why do I always want to jump down when I look at this cliff? After the things Lord Gregor told us to do are finished, I'll jump with you," Dunson whistled casually. "Really? When have I ever lied to you?" A frivolous tone with absolutely no credibility. "Okay, let's quickly finish what Lord Gregor told us to do." Dunson stretched out one foot and dangled it outside the cliff, finding it very fun. On the ground below the watchtower, several young knights were tied up, each looking dazed and frightened. The huge torch on the watchtower had been lit, the oil blazing, like a giant sword of flame piercing the sky. Meeting such a madman, these once arrogant youths had all been completely frightened. The young knight in the center was Adam Marbrand. The other youths were all nobles from the north of the Westerlands, bordering the Westerling family of the Crag. Many lands of the Crag were sold cheaply and mortgaged to their families. Adam's lips had been broken, and all his front teeth had been knocked out. His noble attire was covered in patches of blood. His front teeth had been knocked out one by one with stones by Polliver. Whenever Adam wanted to scream, Polliver's eyes would radiate excitement because he had made a bet with someone he thought existed in the air, completely invisible. If Adam cried out, he would stab the dagger he had prepared long ago into Adam's eyes. Several front teeth were knocked out one by one, and Adam endured it throughout the entire process without uttering a sound. This greatly disappointed Polliver. The young knights beside Adam were all companions who ate and drank with Adam. The reason they were brought here was that when they were having fun in the afternoon, they had all encouraged Adam to turn Jane Westerling into a mistress tonight and had wildly imagined various scenarios. This was originally the casual banter of developing livestock. Every young man gathered together would discuss certain desirable members of the opposite sex, and young women gathered together would also chirp and discuss the demeanor of a certain handsome knight. But the speaker was unintentional, and the listener was mindful. Gregor's status had changed, and many scheming nobles, both big and small, were intentionally or unintentionally trying to curry favor with him. So, Gregor, whose status had become Tywin Lannister's prospective son-in-law, heard these guys' drunken precepts. After learning in detail that, besides Adam, several of the guys were nobles from the north of the Westerlands bordering the Crag, Gregor reported the matter to Tywin. Tywin's expression did not change, as if he had not heard anything at all. Gregor suggested that he could say a few words to Adam and the others about this matter, and Tywin did not say a word, but just waved his hand. So, Polliver and Dunson invited Adam and his good brothers to the watchtower on the mountaintop in the evening to say a few words and share their hearts. Besides Adam, the other youths were all bruised and swollen. They looked very embarrassed, but in fact, they were only slightly injured. Including Adam Marbrand, although his lips were broken and his front teeth were knocked out, he was actually only slightly injured. However, their inner collapse and fear of Gregor and his gang were more serious than being slashed a few times. They had been invited here by a god of slaughter and a madman to talk heart to heart for half an hour. "They're coming up," Duncan whispered. Polliver immediately strode away from the edge of the cliff and hid on the other side of the watchtower. He and Duncan peered out and saw a youth hurrying over with a black cloak on his back. The black cloak belonged to Polliver. "Carried on his back, I won the bet," Polliver said to Duncan excitedly. "You owe me a gold dragon." "How do you know that Miss Jane is definitely loyal to Lord Gregor?" "She doesn't love our lord. I can tell from her eyes that she is a good person, a noble who has no arrogance towards servants and maids. She is the only one. Only she is worthy of our Lord Gregor. She and Lord Gregor are both very good people." "Gregor is a good person?" The nobles would laugh if they heard it. But Adam and the other nobles did not dare to laugh at all when they heard it. They were deeply convinced that this bald, black-bearded guy was a real madman. They could not imagine what terrible things he would do if he provoked him. And Duncan, who was beside the madman, was the god of slaughter. Several of them had once swarmed him, but he easily knocked them down, and then Polliver's sword pointed at their throats. "Get out!" Duncan cut the rope on Adam's hand with one knife. He only glanced at it out of the corner of his eye, and his knife skills were accurate. "You said you wanted to date Jane, now go do it." Chapter 59. Jenny opened her eyes and saw Adu Charlotte squatting beside her, maintaining a polite distance. She found herself on a black cloak. Around her were huge, tall watchtowers. The young knight who carried her up was gone, leaving only her and Adu Charlotte. The torches on the watchtower illuminated the night sky, but it wasn't so bright at the base of the tower. "What's wrong?" Jenny asked, sitting up with a calm tone. But she crossed her arms over her shoulders, instinctively adopting a protective posture. She was wary of Ado's advances. This delighted the madman Polliver, who was hiding on the other side of the tower, eavesdropping. He had always firmly believed in Jenny's purity and loyalty, just as he was unwavering in his loyalty to Lord Gregor. Jenny was different from other noble ladies, a conviction he held from the moment he first saw her. "I rushed while climbing the mountain and fell on the rocks, knocking out a mouthful of teeth," Adu said, his face twisted. Having his teeth knocked out really hurt. But the numbness had passed, and now he was in pain both physically and mentally. "Let's go down the mountain to the Maester's tower." "I'll take a look at your injuries," Jenny said, maintaining her ladylike politeness and elegance. She stood up, walked towards Adu, and extended her hand. "Sir Adu, get up, let me see your injuries first." Adu, however, avoided her as if she were a venomous snake, a hint of suppressed fear flashing in his eyes. He stood up and backed away, maintaining his distance. No need, I'm fine." He had to use all his strength to speak. He didn't dare let Jenny touch him. The madman had told him that if he touched any part of Jenny, he would cut off a piece of flesh from the same spot on Ado's body and grill it to eat. Although he might not suffer such harm in Casterly Rock, tomorrow everyone would leave the city to go home, and Gregor's 63 cavalrymen were capable of keeping their 30 knights and squires on the Golden Road for another chat. However, the problem now was not that he touched Jenny, but that Jenny wanted to help him check his injuries. Jenny had studied medicine. And her heart was kind. She wasn't the kind of person to stand by and watch someone die. Besides, Jenny did have a good impression of Adu Charlotte in her heart, and her heart had fluttered for him. But now her identity was different. She was someone else's legal fiancée. "What's wrong?" Jenny frowned slightly, feeling strange. "Are you afraid of me?" "No, I'm not," Adu quickly denied. "I fell quite badly just now, and I'm still a little dizzy." "Then quickly come and sit down," Jenny said hurriedly. "Quickly sit down on the cloak, I'll check your injuries first. Besides your broken teeth, are there any other injuries?" Since the other party had no intention of forcing her, and was just unable to let go of the thought of seeing her, Jenny relaxed at once. She could see that Adu was really afraid of touching her, always maintaining a polite distance, which filled her pure heart with respect for Adu. At the same time, she also thought that Gregor's notorious reputation might also make Adu fearful. "Thank you for your kindness, Miss Jenny, I asked you to come here tonight to apologize to you." His words were distorted because of the missing front teeth, but Jenny could still understand. "Apologize? Forget it, your friend forcibly carried me up here, and you didn't do anything impolite to me. There's no need to apologize, let me quickly check your injuries." Adu looked dejected, his chest covered in blood, his lips badly broken. He had paid a heavy price for talking to Jenny alone, which filled Jenny with guilt and a surge of medical benevolence. Jenny stepped forward again, gently supporting Ado's shoulder. Adu couldn't back away any further, there were several people on the other side of the stone tower. When Jenny's hand rested on Ado's shoulder, she felt Ado's body tremble instinctively, as if her hands were a branding iron. "Come on, it's too dark under the tower, I can't see clearly." "Come to the cloak," Jenny took the initiative to guide Ado's hand. Adu didn't dare let Jenny touch his hand, she had already touched his shoulder just now. He turned slightly. "Jenny, step back a little and listen to me." Jenny was a noble lady who valued etiquette, so she took a step back to give Adu respect. She really didn't want to see the obvious panicked expression on Ado's face in front of her. She didn't expect Adu to be such an honest and upright shy knight in private. "Jenny, when I was drinking and talking with some friends this afternoon, I said disrespectful words about you in public. I regret it very much now, and saying those unspeakable words also shames my family. I sincerely ask for your forgiveness here." Adu looked at Jenny with sincere and bright eyes. He almost wanted to kneel on one knee. He was guilty of his words, and if he didn't get Jenny's verbal forgiveness, the madman had conveyed the mountain's words, perhaps in Casterly Rock, or perhaps he would be intercepted on the road home after leaving the city, and then his tongue would be cut off. Adu knew that the mountain's words were not a threat. If the mountain said it, he would definitely do it. "Sir Adu, even if you really drank too much, you can't just say things that damage my reputation in public. You are a dignified knight," Jenny said sternly. Adu was so frightened that his heart and liver were splitting. Behind the tower was a madman and a god of slaughter listening. He had apologized, but he had not received Jenny's forgiveness. Behind the tower, the madman Polliver waved his fist forcefully. He had guessed right again, Denson had guessed wrong again. Denson thought that Jenny would forgive Adu as soon as she opened her mouth. After all, she was a noble lady, but Polliver believed that since Jenny was a person who had maintained her fiancé's loyalty to Lord Gregor, it meant that she was a person of principle. A person of principle would not easily forgive others for damaging her reputation. A look of surprise flashed in Denson's eyes. Polliver was just a stubborn, neurotic person, and a bit stupid. Why was he so accurate in judging Jenny's character? Polliver was single-minded. Once he was sure of a person, he would believe in them without a doubt. Adu knelt on one knee. "Jenny, I beg you in the name of the 7 gods and the Charlotte family to forgive my recklessness and verbal crudeness this afternoon." "What do you want me to do to forgive me, you say? I'll do it." Adu was trembling with fear, almost kowtowing. If he didn't get Jenny's forgiveness after more than 3 requests, his tongue would still be cut off by Gregor. Leaving the city to go home, walking the Golden Road, he would have to pass through the mountain's territory. Verbal crime. Verbal crime. Verbal crime. Ado's regret was like a torrential river. Jenny was surprised, she vaguely felt that something was wrong. "Sir Adu, did Lord Gregor threaten you?" "No, absolutely not," Adu quickly denied. "Miss Jenny, this matter really has nothing to do with Lord Gregor, I beg you." "Okay, I forgive you," Jenny said softly. A feeling of contempt for Adu gently rose in her heart, from the depths of her heart. Adu was just a pitiful spineless worm in front of her. "Sir Adu, Sir Gregor is not as fierce as you think, nor as crude as people say. Fierce and crude people don't like kittens. Although he has a bad temper, he still has a delicate and kind side. Sir Adu, you don't have to be afraid of him." Behind the stone tower, Polliver's eyes were like cat's eyes shining in the dark night. "Denson, Miss Jenny is the second person I want to swear allegiance to. Let's come back to jump off the cliff next time." "Why? Let's jump down after we're done." "No, I want to swear allegiance to Miss Jenny, she needs protection. Miss Jenny has her family guards to protect her. Her guards are all idiots, no one can protect her." "Tisk tisk, Polliver, don't be impulsive, can Lord Gregor protect Jenny?" "Yes." "Then does she still need your protection?" "Tisk tisk. Obvious playful pleasure. We still have a few guys to deal with." "Oh. I won't forget that." In the shadows under the watchtower, Polliver's shining eyes were like those of a wild beast. He looked at the unlucky guys beside him, the dagger in his hand spinning around, the young knights shivering, completely devoid of their usual demeanor. Chapter 60. Ivan Leford was quite uneasy. As the only son of Leo Leford, the Earl of Golden Tooth, he had received a good education since childhood and enjoyed a life of luxury. He was polite and a well-behaved boy, his only shortcoming being a lack of courage. He was a young knight who lacked boldness. His knighthood was bestowed by his father, Leo Lefort, somewhat reluctantly. Although Ivan's physical fitness, swordsmanship and horsemanship had been professionally trained, and he had sufficient strength, he was neither brave nor daring enough. He was a handsome young man who looked good but was absolutely useless. He was the handsome young man who, at the request of Sweet-Mouth Raff, went by the name of Adéchaliot to test Jenny Westerling's loyalty. His temperament was more feminine than masculine, which was spotted and chosen by an old fox like Sweet-Mouth Raff. This well-behaved boy would not mess around with Jenny Westerling. Ivan Lefort now regretted agreeing to help Sweet-Mouth Raff, because a bald, black-bearded fellow kept looking at him from the crowd. The right side of that fellow's face twitched from time to time, as if in a spasm, which made him look not quite normal. In Ivan's opinion, the people around Sir Gregor were all a bit abnormal, but that fellow's abnormality was obvious. The soldier with a neurotic temperament who made Ivan uneasy was Gregor's loyal fan, Poliver. Last night, when Ivan, wrapped in a black cloak, sent Jenny to the foot of the watchtower, everyone saw him, but he didn't see anyone else. After completing his mission, he left in a hurry, thinking the matter was over, but today he realized that he was being targeted by a bald, black-bearded, neurotic man from Gregor's group. When that fellow saw Ivan looking at him, he grinned, revealing a mouthful of yellow teeth, as if he hadn't used salt to rinse his mouth in a long time, which made Ivan feel nauseous and almost vomit his breakfast. Just as Ivan was avoiding the neurotic fellow's gaze, the fellow came to Ivan's side, startling him. Poliver was a tall man, and his body was very strong, without a bit of fat, but he walked like a ghost, without making a sound. Good, good. Poliver looked at Ivan's fair and slender hands, his eyes full of fiery light. His tongue stretched out from his mouth full of yellow teeth and licked his lower lip from right to left, as if he was cleaning up the grease stuck to his lips after eating grilled meat. Ivan felt a chill in his heart and quickly avoided him, walking to his father, Leo Lefort's side. However, just as he stood still, his hand was grabbed by someone from the other side. Ivan turned around, greatly surprised. The neurotic fellow had actually circled around to his other side and was stroking his hand. "What are you doing?" Ivan shouted, forcefully Poliver's hand. The area that Poliver had stroked made Ivan feel uncomfortable. If it were a piece of clothing, he would definitely never touch it again in his life. But it was his hand. Although he felt disgusted, he still needed his hand. This low shout attracted the attention of many people around, and also caused Earl Leo Lefort, who was watching the justing training of two knights, to turn his head. Every morning, in Duke Tywin's large training ground, it was customary to train the cavalry's justing skills. After everyone watched the cavalry's morning exercises and had breakfast, they would return to their respective territories. Poliver grinned, not feeling that there was anything wrong with him pestering Ivan. He had an expression as if he had seen a rare treasure. "What beautiful hands, really, there are no more beautiful hands than these." Poliver grinned at Earl Leo, "These hands are works of art, they should be cut off and soaked in a wine bottle, to be properly preserved, really." His strange words and neurotic smile made Earl Leo feel a chill in his heart. He was about to rebuke this strange fellow when Sweet-Mouth Raff ran over. "I'm sorry, Earl, this is my brother, he likes to joke." Sweet-Mouth Raff was familiar with these nobles because of his sweet mouth. After becoming a knight, he was even more qualified to associate with the nobles. The major powerful nobles in the Westlands all knew that Gregor had Sweet-Mouth Raff by his side, a person with honey on his lips but a ruthless and poisonous heart. "No, Raft, look, don't you think these hands are exquisite works of art? Cut them off, put them in a glass bottle, soak them in wine, add a few petals." Poliver said to Sweet-Mouth Raff with a look of fascination. He gave the impression that he loved Ivan's hands to death. Sweet-Mouth Raff immediately interrupted him, "Poliver, if you don't return to the team, I'll tell Miss Jenny." Before he finished speaking, Poliver's face changed, and he made a gesture for Sweet-Mouth Raff to be quiet, and scurried away. Sweet-Mouth Raff gave Earl Leo and Knight Ivan an apologetic look. He said in a low voice, I'm sorry, Earl Leo, don't mind the disturbance, don't mind the disturbance." Although Poliver likes to collect eyes, hands and toes to soak in wine for appreciation, I can guarantee that he will never touch Knight Ivan's hands. But Knight Ivan's hands are indeed very beautiful, it would be a pity if they were cut off. Earl Leo's face turned ugly. He looked to the other side. Gregor and Jenny were watching the knights justing. In the Westlands, getting involved with Gregor's gang of scum was, to be honest, a headache for anyone. Gregor was brutal and terrifying, and had done many shocking and cruel things. Just like flies to dog shit, a large group of people gathered around Gregor, none of them were good people. The few young knights next to him listened in fear and trepidation. These few people were the young knights who were invited by Polliver and Dunson to the watchtower on the top of the mountain last night to chat for a while. Sweetmouth Raff comforted the Leo father and son with sweet words, then came to the middle of the few young knights who were frightened in their hearts. He lowered his voice, as if someone was eavesdropping around. "Hey, did you all remember what Polliver and Dunson said to you last night?" The few young men nodded desperately. Sweetmouth Raff was very satisfied with their reaction. "That's good, wait for your good news. A month later, our Lord Gregor will personally come to your door to thank you." The few young men were frightened and repeatedly saluted Sweetmouth Raff, asking him to convey to Lord Gregor that they would never dare to trouble Lord Gregor to visit them. They could not bear it at all, and they were ashamed. Polliver's words just now had frightened them. If Gregor brought a bunch of lunatics like Polliver to find them again, it would definitely not be a pleasant thing. Because the Westerling family had declined, the families of these young men had purchased a lot of Earl Gavin's land at ultra-low prices, and Earl Gavin was also forced to mortgage 9 pieces of land to these families. The mortgaged land was easy to deal with, just redeem it with money. But the land that had already been sold cheaply could not be bought back with money. Land was permanent property, and there were people on the land. However, Gregor used the excuse of verbal crime to first intimidate the children of these families. According to the experience in Earth civilization, children were the darlings of their parents. Letting these noble children bring back some minor injuries and psychological shadows of collapse was the best opening form to pass a message to Gregor first. Those patriarchs were here, and even a domineering person like Gregor had no right to directly find them. Only this rogue method was useful, clever, gave face, and would not add to the happy event. If these nobles reacted slowly after receiving feedback from the young men after returning home, their initiative was not strong, and their enthusiasm was not high, then a month later, Gregor, after completing his wedding, would officially visit these nobles in the capacity of a Westerling family member to have a chat. For everything, ringing a warning bell first was a kind of politeness from a rogue. Gregor, who had been possessed by a transmigrator who was a third-year science and engineering dog and controlled his thoughts, had less violent bloodlust and more scheming and cunning. The story had just begun. Chapter 61. When Gregor and Jane appeared together in the stands that morning, everyone except the stone-hearted Lord Tywin felt a slight tremor in their hearts. The betrothal of Gregor and Jane was a marriage that no one saw as promising. The pairing of a wolf and a beauty was destined to be a twisted tragedy. It was also an unexpected royal decree. Before this, no one in the entire Westerlands would have imagined that Tywin would marry off a talented and beautiful ward like Jane to the mountain. However, on the morning of only the second day after the betrothal, Gregor and Jane appeared together in the stands of the great courtyard, watching the Lannister family cavalry's morning training session. Moreover, Jane's height was not much different from Gregor's, because Gregor had placed a stool under her feet. The floor-length dress hung down, perfectly concealing the stool, making her look like a long-legged beauty. Jane held a snow-white Lysane cat in her arms with a face full of affection. There was no doubt that the cat had sobered up. Bronn, the master-at-arms who was riding a horse and directing the cavalry's morning training, had a distorted expression on his face. He saw the cat in Jane's arms. The cat was originally his wife's favorite, but now it had become a small treat for Gregor to please Jane. This made Bronn feel very uncomfortable. But Bronn had no way to deal with this swordplay student of his. A courteous person is less able to deal with an impolite person. Only a barbaric person is the nemesis of an impolite person, but Bronn is a knight who values honor. His sword speaks better than his mouth. Adam Marbrand did not appear among the crowd watching the cavalry's morning training. His personal maester stayed up all night because Adam could not sleep. His mouth, where teeth had been knocked out, was burning, affecting half of his body. The maester gave him poppy milk to drink, but he still couldn't fall asleep. Having a few teeth knocked out was not a major injury. Adam's wound was in his heart. Ever since his 7th brother captured Jane Clegane and raped her on the mountain, the Marbrand family's nightmare seemed to have begun. Every time he clashed with the mountain, Adam found that they lost miserably. He wondered how his father would handle the feud with the mountain if he were at home. It wasn't until dawn that Adam, in an extremely bad mood, finally fell asleep. In the great courtyard, Gregor and Jane's intimacy intentionally or unintentionally stimulated everyone's senses, and Jane and Gregor unintentionally became the focus of the audience. Lord Gawain was also incredulous. He knew nothing about what happened in the watchtower last night. He had not heard any news about Adam and several young men being punished for their words. After all, it was just a trivial matter in Gregor's eyes. The only one who was more vigilant about Gregor was Sir Kevin Lannister. He never would have imagined that the Mountain could get so close to Jane so quickly. The Mountain aside, he was like a wild dog, but Jane was a lady who had been carefully cultivated in an ancient noble family. She could not have accepted the Mountain so easily. It was as fast as love at first sight. The one with the most complicated feelings was Lord Gawain. Watching his eldest daughter, who had been carefully cultivated to be both talented and beautiful, stand beside a jackal with no resistance, he was still very worried. A wolf and a beauty was not the marriage he wanted. Someone gently nudged Lord Gawain's elbow. Lord Gawain turned around and saw Sir Yarwick, with a humble smile on his face. "Lord Gawain, let's go back together today," Sir Yarwick said in a flattering tone. This made Lord Gawain feel slightly surprised by the sudden humility of the other party. "Okay, everyone lives in the north. It's best to go together," Lord Gawain responded politely. "Lord Gawain, after we get back, I will send someone to deliver the land deed you mortgaged to your mansion. You can pay whatever you want for the redemption of the land deed," Yarwick said sincerely, obviously a little afraid that Lord Gawain would disagree. This was very abnormal. Even if Lord Tywin had taken Jane as his ward, it would not have made House Westerling so powerful that Sir Yarwick feared them to such an extent. Okay. Lord Gawain still knew that this was a great bargain even in his confusion. Whatever he wanted meant that he would get back the mortgaged land for free, without having to pay the debt at the time of the mortgage. This gift was much more valuable than the gifts at the award ceremony and engagement ceremony. After all, land was the foundation that a family could inherit for generations. Sir Yarwick breathed a sigh of relief. He thanked Lord Gawain quickly, and as he withdrew, he said with a smile, "Lord Gawain, please give my regards to Sir Gregor for me. My children are still ignorant. Please forgive him for any offence." Okay. Lord Gawain was confused, but agreeing first was the basic courtesy. A moment later, Sir Angus walked over. "Lord Gawain, let's go back together after breakfast," Sir Angus said in a relaxed tone, with a smile on his face. "Okay, everyone lives in the north, not far apart. It's best to go together," Lord Gawain responded politely. "Lord Gawain, after we get back, I will send someone to deliver the land deed you mortgaged to your mansion. There is no need to repay the money. Just consider it my advance blessing for Jane and Sir Gregor's wedding in a month," Angus said very generously, but his voice was suppressed. Lord Gawain's heart skipped a beat. Sir Yarwick's matter just now had given him experience. "That won't do," Lord Gawain said. "When I get back, I will pay you the principal and interest according to the agreed interest rate, not a single copper star less." The smile on Sir Angus's face froze, and then his tone became pleading. "Lord Gawain, you and I are old neighbours. Actually, they are far apart, so don't say such polite words. I will return the mortgaged land deed to you. But I hope you can talk to Sir Gregor about the few pieces of land you sold to me in the past. If he really wants to take them back, don't let me lose too much." The money Gawain mortgaged the land for to save his life was actually pitifully small. People are poor and short-sighted, and Sir Angus had taken a big advantage. When Lord Gawain heard Angus say this, his heart skipped another beat. He looked at the mountain across the training ground, watching the cavalry's morning training with his daughter, and suddenly felt emotional. His timid courage, which had always been formed because he was poor and short-sighted, became inexplicably bold and strong. "Sir Angus, I will definitely convey your words to Sir Gregor. When I sold the land to you, it was really a small sale with a big giveaway. You and I both know that I suffered a big loss. Alas, now I am very ashamed. My father's status has improved my family's situation a little bit. I will definitely take back those few pieces of land. After all, they are the foundation passed down by our ancestors." This is also what Sir Gregor meant. Everyone is a vassal of Lord Tywin. It is better to discuss things and try not to have conflicts. These words contained both a warning and a threat, and gradually had the temperament of the Mountain Rogue team. Try not to have conflicts, which obviously meant if you don't agree, we'll fight. Lord Gawain secretly looked at Sir Angus. Angus's previous generosity was gone. Yes, Lord Gawain is right. We are all vassals of Lord Tywin. It is better to discuss things and not have conflicts. Not long after Sir Angus left, Sir Banquo slowly walked over. Lord Gawain, let's go back together after breakfast. Oh, I'm afraid that won't work. I have something to delay me, and I'm afraid I won't be able to go back with you. Sir Gregor has some things to ask me, and I can't be sure when I can leave. Sorry. Lord Gawain apologized politely, not giving Sir Banquo another chance to speak. Oh, I have something that I haven't explained to Sir Gregor yet. Excuse me, I have to go to the other side of the training ground first. Lord Gawain withdrew and left Sir Banquo, who had prepared a lot of words, behind. The alarm bell that Gregor had Sweet-Mouth Ralph, Dunson the jailer, and loyal fan Polliver ring echoed back with rare speed. Gregor seriously underestimated his celebrity effect. After all, a university engineering dog had never been a celebrity. Looking up at the wolf and beauty opposite him, Lord Gawain suddenly felt that Sir Gregor was not only becoming more pleasing to the eye, but also had a bit of friendliness. Chapter 62. The Westerlands has three abundances. First, abundance of gold. The Westerlands is wealthy due to its gold, and Lord Tywin's wealth is the highest in the entire country. Second, abundance of mountains. The northern, eastern, and southwestern regions are filled with continuous mountain ranges stretching for thousands of miles. The capital, Casterly Rock, is built within an entire stone mountain that is 20 miles long. Third, abundance of miners. Because there are many mountains and much gold, miners are the Westerland's most distinctive occupation, even more numerous than the farmers, hunters, and fishermen combined. A three-headed dog banner fluttering in the wind slowly emerged from the lion's mouth of Casterly Rock. The banner-bearer was a black stone rider from Clegane lands. The orderly cavalry advanced in neat columns. Behind the cavalry was a tall, luxurious carriage, with 6 white seashells as crests on the carriage curtains. 6 white seashells are the sigil of House Westerling. Gregor and Earl Gawain rode their horses beside the carriage. Miss Jane sat inside the carriage. Behind the carriage were 8 cavalry guards from House Westerling, arranged in 2 rows. Not far behind the 8 guards were dozens of professional gold miners that Gregor had hired in Casterly Rock. The golden tooth of House Serret already belonged to Gregor Clegane. It was legitimate for him to hire professional miners to mine gold, without needing to conceal anything anymore. After Lord Tywin took Jane as his foster daughter, he had her stay in Casterly Rock. He would not let her return to the crag before she married Gregor. Earl Gawain was reluctant to part with his daughter and decided not to return with the northern neighbours. Instead, he changed his mind and, at Sir Gregor's invitation, went to see Gregor Clegane's lands with his daughter. Without Earl Gawain's knowledge, Gregor worked hard to recover the land that Earl Gawain had been cheaply sold and mortgaged, threatening the nobles who had taken advantage of him to spit out the fat they had swallowed. This caused Earl Gawain's view of Gregor to fundamentally reverse. Don't think that those neighbours took the initiative to approach Earl Gawain to show their goodwill after Gregor issued his threat. In fact, it was unlikely that those nobles would willingly give up the fat they had swallowed. Their low posture did not mean they would greatly concede. The more smiling and bowing a person is, the more scheming they are in their heart, and the more one must be wary. Earl Gawain estimated that he would have to rely on Gregor's force to recover all the foundations left by his ancestors. Negotiating with those nobles one by one should be smoother. He was afraid that they would collude after returning to confer. Earl Gawain estimated that he would not be able to buy back those lands at the original price without severely beating 1 or 2 nobles to establish his authority. Earl Gawain decided to have a good talk with Gregor about this matter. Naturally, he hoped to pay as little money as possible, preferably the original price, which was ridiculously low. But those neighbors spoke beautiful words while having different thoughts in their hearts. If he had to rely on force to establish his authority in the end, the strength of the crag and Clegane keep would not be enough. This was a very specific problem. But no matter how much he speculated and guessed in private, Earl Gawain knew that he could not do without Gregor Clegane to take back the land he had cheaply sold. When Gregor invited Earl Gawain and Miss Jane to visit Clegane, Earl Gawain asked Lord Tywin for instructions, and Lord Tywin agreed. It was also good to let his foster daughter Jane see Sir Gregor's small territory. Otherwise, if she was just bored in Casterly Rock for a month, Jane would not have any fun. Tywin himself was an extremely boring person. He could live with Jane in Casterly Rock and not say a word to her for 3 days. Jane's sister Cersei Lannister, older brother Jaime Lannister, and second brother Tyrion Lannister were not in Casterly Rock. They were visiting the Starks in Winterfell, located 3,000 miles away in the north, and no one was there to play with Jane. A month was neither long nor short, but it would seem very long if there was no one to talk to usually. So, after hiring the miners, Gregor returned to Clegane Keep, which was not very far away, with the Jane and her father. Coming out of the Lion's Mouth of Casterly Rock, there were 3 main roads, the River Road to the east, the Gold Road to the southeast, and the Coast Road to the south. Gregor's men could take either the Gold Road or the Coast Road, as the distance was about the same. Both roads required a detour to enter Clegane lands. They took the Coast Road this time. The Coast Road would pass through Lannisport, the largest city in the Westerlands. 2 hours later, the cavalry and carriage arrived at Lannisport. The dozens of miners Gregor had hired were far behind and completely out of sight. Gregor did not send cavalry to urge the workers on, nor was he afraid that the workers would take a detour and run away. He could afford to lose the small amount of the workers' advance commission, but once he found out about desertion, the problem would become very serious. The miners' ancestors for 18 generations would be beaten until they shat by Gregor's men. Not a single miner from Casterly Rock who dared to take Gregor's wages and deposits would run away, nor would they dare to run away. The team stopped on the road outside Lannisport to rest, eating dry food and drinking wine. It wouldn't be dry food and water, soldiers in this world all drink wine. The wine was not pure, and the alcohol content was not as high as the wine in Earth's civilization. Jane also got out of the car to get some fresh air. She held the kitten Angela in her arms. The beautiful woman and the well-behaved cat were particularly pleasing to the eye. "Dunson," Gregor shouted. Dunson, who was chatting and laughing with a group of brothers, immediately ran over. "Lead the brothers back. Miss Jane, Earl Gawain and I are going to Lannisport." "Yes, sir. When will you be back?" "Come back for dinner this afternoon. Tell Lady Allen to prepare food to entertain the distinguished guests." "Yes, sir." Sweetmouth Rafford Clegane stayed in Casterly Rock to train, promote and teach the military whistle method of controlling the army, and would not return until a month later. With Sweetmouth gone, Executioner Dunson became the captain of the team, and Polliver became the vice-captain. Jane, who was eating by the carriage, was quite surprised. She looked at her father, Earl Gawain. Earl Gawain shrugged his shoulders, making an expression that he didn't know either. Gawain and Jane did not know in advance that Gregor was going to Lannisport with them. "Sir Gregor, are we going to Lannisport?" Jane asked. "Yes." Gregor's rough, booming voice naturally lowered an octave. This small detail made Miss Jane feel quite satisfied. She had not spent much time with Gregor, but the small details in his words and deeds were full of consideration and care for Jane, which made the small warmth in Jane's heart continue. She was also constantly updating her understanding of Sir Gregor. "Sir, may I ask what we are going to Lannisport for?" This was also a question that Earl Gawain wanted to know. "We are going to see someone who is very important to you and me, Miss Jane," Gregor said softly, as polite as a well-mannered nobleman. Chapter 63. Gregor knelt on the floor, upon a rug whose colors had long faded, its patterns worn away. Seated opposite Gregor, across a dilapidated table, was an old person whose face and gender were indistinguishable. A head of dusty, disheveled hair obscured the entirety of this old person's face. The table was cluttered with a dense array of bottles and jars, their labels bearing the names of various medications. Standing behind Gregor, Lord Gawain and Miss Jane did not recognize the script on the bottles. It was a language they had never seen before, similar to the languages of Westeros, yet distinctly different. The room was filled with a strange medicinal odor, causing Jane, who had studied medicine, to frown. Lord Gawain pulled out a handkerchief and held it to his nose. Miss Jane's carriage was parked just outside, guarded by 8 Westerling family guards. This was a very secluded corner of the city. Not far from the house was where the residents of the street piled their garbage. Although there was a drainage ditch, it had been filled with garbage and silt due to long neglect. Fortunately, it hadn't rained, or sewage would be flowing everywhere. This street was also inhabited by the poor. No matter how many nobles and merchants there were in Lannisport, the poor were like rats, found everywhere. Lord Gawain had a vague idea of the identity of the old person sitting behind the medicine bottles. Jane, standing in front of Lord Gawain, turned to look at her father. Lord Gawain could see from Jane's eyes that she might have guessed the old person's identity as well. However, neither of them dared to be certain. After all, Lord Gawain hadn't seen or heard from the old person in 16 years. As for Jane, she had never met this old person since birth. She had only heard some stories about the old person from her mother and uncle's conversations. Grandmother. Gregor said tentatively in a soft voice, my name is Gregor Clegane, and I have come to see you with my fiancée, Jane Westerling, and my father-in-law, Gawain Westerling. The deference in Gregor's voice astonished Jane and Lord Gawain. Both were very surprised. They had never seen Gregor so polite and respectful to anyone. Gregor's notorious dominance and strength had completely disappeared. In front of the poorly dressed old person, he was like an obedient child. Lord Gawain wanted to turn around and flee, but he forcibly resisted. Gregor exerted an intangible influence on Lord Gawain. The old person sitting across the table made no sound, as if asleep. Just as Jane couldn't bear the strange smell in the room and felt like gagging, the old person moved. A withered, skeletal hand emerged from the cloth robe, picked up a bone splinter of indeterminate color from the table. The bone splinter was very sharp, like a maester's surgical needle. The speed of that fearsome bone hand was so fast that Lord Gawain and Jane didn't even see clearly. The bone splinter pricked the back of Gregor's hand, which was resting on the table. A bead of blood emerged from the back of Gregor's hand. Lord Gawain and Miss Jane exclaimed in surprise, but Gregor didn't move an inch. The old person's bone hand pinched the bone splinter and slowly retracted. The tip of the bone splinter was stained with Gregor's blood. The old person used the other hand to lift the disheveled hair that was draped over the face, revealing a toothless, sunken mouth. The bone splinter was slowly placed in this mouth, and a long tongue extended, licking the bloodstains off the bone splinter. Gregor Clegane, the old person spoke, the voice of an old woman. Yes, grandmother, Gregor said respectfully. If you go east, you will die by fire, the old person said. This sentence confused Jane and Lord Gawain. But Gregor was shaken all over. He knew what he would encounter if he stayed in West Eros. He originally had a second self-rescue plan to dig for gold, become a rich man, and then go east, but the old person's words suddenly reminded him, making him suddenly think of the greater enemy he had across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen, who was as lucky as if she had a cheat code. Daenerys Targaryen was the posthumous child of King Aerys Targaryen, who had been served by Duke Tywin for 20 years as the previous king. In the year 283 of Aegon's conquest, the Mad King Aerys Targaryen was killed from behind by his Kingsguard, Jaime Lannister, and the capital and palace fell. Sir Gregor Clegane, known as the Mountain, and Sir Amory Lorch, known as the Poison Scorpion, together bloodied the palace. Sir Amory Lorch's coat of arms was a black manticore on a red background. His people were as vicious and cruel as his coat of arms, the manticore. He personally killed Daenerys's niece, Prince Rhaegar's 4-year-old daughter, Princess Rhaenys. He stabbed her more than 50 times until the girl was silent. Afterwards, Duke Tywin Lannister was very disgusted with Sir Amory Lorch's behavior. He believed that Amory lacked brains, and the correct way should have been to coax the child and then use a soft silk pillow to do it. The other villain, Gregor, raped Daenerys's sister-in-law, Princess Elia Martell, and broke into the royal nursery, smashing Daenerys's nephew, Princess Elia Martell's son, Prince Aegon, in his swaddling clothes, against the wall. This was the blood feud between Gregor and Daenerys was in the east. Daenerys would grow into an absolute ruler on the continent across the narrow sea. She was the unburnt, unharmed by the great fire, and she herself belonged to fire. She would also have 3 dragons, and dragons also belonged to fire. The old person made a prophecy, if Gregor Clegane went east, he would die by fire. If Gregor believed this old person's words, he would have to cancel this second plan to escape east. The east was also the place where the faith of the red god Arhillar spread. Arhillar was the red god, the lord of light, the god of fire and shadow. If Gregor did not die at the hands of Daenerys Targaryen, he was likely to die at the hands of the red god believers. In the free city of Volantis, there was the largest known red god temple in this world. The red god temple had an armed organization, the Fiery Hand. Gregor believed in this prophecy. He believed in the mysticism of this world. Before he crossed over, he was an atheist. But in this world, there was indeed the will of God walking, and there would indeed be dragons. In the north, there would be the children of the cold god, the others and the whites. Gregor had come to find this old person specifically. This old person was a witch. But she was none other than the mother of Lord Gawain's wife, Miss Jane's own grandmother, from Essos, the eastern continent across the narrow sea. In her youth, she married a spice merchant and was brought to Lannisport. In Lannisport, people called her the witch. The spice merchant and the witch had a son. This son did not want to be a merchant anymore and wanted to be a noble, so he founded a family named Spicer. Spicer had 2 children, a son, Rolf Spicer, and a daughter, Cybele Spicer. Cybele married Lord Gawain and gave birth to a daughter, Jane Westerling. Now Jane Westerling was Gregor's fiancée. Chapter 64. Gregor understood the witch's prophetic abilities. His deep confidence in the witch's prophetic abilities came from his familiarity with the world's already known trajectory. In the year 276 of Aegon's conquest, to welcome King Aerys' tour of the Wester lands, Duke Tywin held a tournament at Lanny Sport. At that time, Duke's daughter Cersei Lannister, Jane Farman of Fair Isle, and Melora Heatherspoon, the daughter of Sir Tybold Heatherspoon, all came to Lanny Sport. When the 3 children heard that the witch could foresee the future, their curiosity was piqued, and they secretly sought out the witch together, behind the backs of the adults. At that time, Melora was the oldest, but only 11 years old, Cersei was 10, and Jane was the youngest, at 9. When the witch sat behind a long table filled with medicine bottles, brushed aside her hair, and opened her pale yellow eyes, Jane Farman screamed and immediately ran away. But Melora and Cersei stayed, insisting on hearing prophecies about themselves, but they were refused by the witch. At this moment, Cersei, only 10 years old, threatened the witch that if she refused to tell her and Melora's future prophecies, she would send family soldiers to burn down the witch's house and hang her on the tree outside the gate. The witch was forced to tell the 2 girls their future prophecies. The witch's first prophecy was that Cersei would marry the king at the age of 17 and become queen. This made Cersei ecstatic, because her father was going to propose to King Aerys at the banquet, hoping to marry Cersei to Prince Rhaegar. Cersei had already met Rhaegar and liked him very much. At that time, Cersei thought that the king she would marry in 7 years would be Rhaegar Targaryen. The second prophecy the witch made was that Cersei would have 19 children, 16 of whom belonged to the king, and the remaining 3 belonged to Cersei. Cersei didn't understand at all at the time, but now Cersei understood. The third prophecy was that Cersei's children would be shrouded in gold, and when Cersei cried for the loss of her children, she would be strangled to death by her brother. The first 2 prophecies have now come true, and the third prophecy accompanies Cersei, bringing her a lifetime of shadows. The witch also predicted the future of the 11-year-old girl Melora, and the witch told Melora that her desire to marry Jaime would not be realized, and that tonight would be her death. "Little sister, your death will come tonight. Haven't you smelled her scent yet? She's right next to you." The witch hinted to Melora that the murderer who killed Melora was her playmate Cersei. Cersei picked up a medicine bottle from the table and smashed it into the witch's eyes. Melora didn't believe the witch's prophecy. However, this prophecy came true. Melora fell into the well and drowned that night. Because she was close to Jaime, Cersei saw her, and Cersei lured Melora to the well and pushed her down. Melora's body was fished out of the well the next afternoon. Now Gregor knew that it was not the first time Cersei had killed someone. Queen Cersei, Jane Westerling's elder sister, was a ruthless and beautiful monster who was not easy to deal with. Also in this year, not long after the incident happened, it was by the pool in Cersei's house. Cersei tricked her 3-year-old younger brother, the imp Tyrion Lannister, to the pool to see the fish, and then pushed Tyrion into the pool. Tyrion Lannister struggled in the water, and the noise alarmed the servants, and Tyrion was rescued. When her father asked Cersei, she said that Tyrion had accidentally fallen into the pool himself. The imp Tyrion was hated by his father Tywin and also hated by his sister Cersei because his body was deformed at birth and his mother died in childbirth. Gregor also knew that Cersei had secretly taken scissors to kill him shortly after Tyrion was born, but her twin brother Jaime Lannister stopped her that time. Cersei failed to murder Tyrion several times, but eventually these things were known to Duke Tywin. Because Duke Tywin could not deny in front of the 7 gods that Tyrion was his blood, Tyrion had the Lannister surname, and he had the responsibility to protect Tyrion, no matter how unwilling he was. Out of family honor and faith in the 7 gods, Duke Tywin sent a special servant to take care of Tyrion Lannister, and did not allow Cersei to approach this deformed younger brother again. The imp Tyrion Lannister finally grew up safely. Gregor believed in the witch's prophetic abilities because he understood these secrets that were unknown to outsiders. Having such a powerful prophetic witch among his relatives, Gregor decided to take advantage of it. In this mystical world where mysticism will gradually flourish with the appearance of dragons, in addition to fierce generals and battle-hardened soldiers, Gregor hopes to obtain the help of wizards with magical abilities. The witch was the best candidate, he thought. Because the witch was a wizard, tinkering with all kinds of strange potions day and night, her 2 sons left her. The two sons did not want to become merchants without status like their father, nor did they want to become neurotic wizards like their mother. The two brothers set up their own businesses and worked hard. Being promoted to the nobility by Duke Tywin was their goal. Therefore, after her husband died, although the witch had sons in Lannisport, she lived alone like an old woman. Although the two sons founded the Spicer family, their lives did not outlive the witch and died. One of the sons left behind Rolf Spicer and Cybele Spicer, and the other son left behind Samwell Spicer. Although there was blood in the world, the witch was used to living alone. After the death of her sons, her grandsons and granddaughters had no contact with each other. Gregor was the first of the Spicer bloodline to come to the witch. Regardless of what Jane and Earl Gawain thought, Gregor was determined to take the witch to Clegane Keep. He had already planned when he was building the September of the Seven that the Clegane September of the Seven needed a priest, his future army needed a scholar, a chaplain, and no matter how he looked at it, the witch was the best candidate. Under Gregor's enthusiastic guidance, Jane and Earl Gawain stepped forward to meet the witch's relatives. The witch said, "Gawain, how is Cybele?" "She's fine, Grandma." "How about that kid Rolf?" "He's fine too." Rolf Spicer was Jane's uncle. After Cybele married Earl Gawain, Rolf went to Craighall with his sister. Rolf was a fierce general with a broken nose, a scar on his face, and a fierce appearance. Rolf did not come to Casterly Rock with Earl Gawain this time. Earl Gawain must leave one person in Craighall whenever he leaves Craighall for business. Rolf was the acting lord. "Grandmother, I have built a September of the Seven for you, built a special pharmacy for you, and hired special servants for you. Come with us to Clegane Keep, and let us take good care of you in the days to come." Gregor was respectful and sincere. Chapter 65. No matter how powerful a wizard is, they are only skilled in the mystical arts. In other aspects, eating, drinking, living, aging, and dying, they are just ordinary mortals with flesh and blood. In this world, there are two major schools of thought. One is hard scientific knowledge, which is the Citadel in Old Town. Every piece of knowledge in the Citadel is concrete science. The scholars of the Citadel study architecture, metallurgy, medicine, botany, astronomy, geography, astrology, seasons. Every noble has a scholar who has passed the rigorous examinations of the Citadel. The scholars are responsible for solving all knowledge-based problems that nobles encounter in their lives, acting as all-around life consultants. Completely opposite to the scientific knowledge mastered by the scholars is the mystical arts. The mystical arts include divination, magic, a different kind of apothecary than that of the scholars, theology, necromancy, and so on. The learning and knowledge of the mystical arts cannot be understood with the learning and knowledge of the Citadel, nor can they be explained with scientific knowledge, because it is completely inexplicable. Practitioners of the mystical arts include wizards, priests, silent sisters, pastors, monks, warlocks, shadowbinders, bishops, friars, green seers, and so on. Gregor Clegane sought to change his fate, and he needed capable people from all fields to gather under his banner. He, along with Jane and Lord Gawain, came to find the witch, appealing to her emotions and reasoning with her, but the witch remained unmoved. She was even colder to Jane and Lord Gawain, showing no familial affection whatsoever. Gregor said, "Grandmother, are you unwilling to go to the September of Clegane's Keep? That is not my home. This is not your home either. I am used to this place. You will get used to a new place even more. Your eating, clothing, housing, and transportation all require someone to take care of you, grandmother. You are old. The chosen people of God do not fear aging and death." Well, okay. Gregor said, "Grandmother, will your God tell you what I will do next?" The witch's turbid yellow eyes stared at Gregor through her long hair, her expression terrifying. Her rejection of Gregor, Jane, and Lord Gawain was obvious. No wizard knows everything. Many wizards are only proficient in one area, such as the pyromancers of King's Landing, who only study wildfire and know very little about other mystical knowledge. Because wizards spend a long time in the laboratory studying various strange potions, their bodies lack exercise, so they are very weak. Elderly wizards need even more care. Usually, it is the wizards' apprentices who take care of elderly wizards. The martial prowess of wizards is no different from that of ordinary people. Any swordsman can defeat a whole team of them. Gregor did not stand up, but lightly lifted the witch over the table. The witch was furious and began to curse through her toothless mouth. However, all was in vain. Gregor gently embraced the witch, stood up, and walked towards the door. The door was already closed, but Gregor did not reach out to open it. He strode over, and with a bang, the door was smashed to pieces by him. Jane and Lord Gawain were dumbfounded. Because of this bursting out of the door, the witch's independent plank house creaked and was on the verge of collapsing. Jane and Lord Gawain hurried out, afraid that the wooden house would collapse in the next second. Gregor put the witch, who was gritting her teeth and cursing him, into the carriage. The witch immediately struggled to get out of the carriage, but Gregor blocked her with one hand. Gregor's hand was like an insurmountable wall for the witch. Gregor respectfully said to the witch, "Grandmother, you can curse me, but you must not get out of the carriage. Otherwise, I will burn all your potions and your house. Your neighbors on this street will be punished by me." A table full of potion bottles and the raw materials for potions piled up in the corner of the wall were like the witch's life. The witch was old, and she could not do without the enthusiastic help of her neighbors on this street in her daily life. The witch was stunned and dared not get out of the carriage. She retreated and sat back, but kept waving her hands and feet, cursing Gregor and finally cursing her deceased husband, her two sons, her granddaughters Cybele and grandsons Rilo and Samuel, her grandson-in-law Lord Gawain, her great-granddaughter Jane, and so on. 22 years ago, when Cersei Lannister was 10 years old, she threatened to burn the witch's house and hang her in a tree to force the witch to tell her future predictions. This shows that the witch's own martial prowess is equal to 0. She may also have some unknown killing methods, but it must have nothing to do with force. Perhaps due to some taboo, or perhaps because the dragons disappeared, she could not use her dark magic to kill people casually. In this world, because the dragons completely disappeared, various magic scrolls and spells gradually became ineffective, and eventually the power of magic declined, which led to the complete fall of wizards from their ruling position. The scholars of the citadel took the opportunity to rise, and their status became higher day by day. The king's hand and the nobles' assistants were all scholars, and the wizards completely withdrew from high-level politics and the noble power class. Gregor asked Lord Gawain to send a guard to hire an ox cart, and everyone worked together to move all the bottles, jars, flowers, and plants from the witch's room onto the ox cart. The witch dared not get out of the carriage, stood on Jane's carriage, cursing and scolding everyone for the order in which they placed her bottles and jars. Miss Jane stood aside, holding the kitten, and was surprised by her grandmother's irritable personality and tireless energy for scolding people. Half an hour later, everything was packed up, and the witch was tired of scolding. Jane dared not ride in the same carriage as the witch, so she got on Gregor's horse. Whenever Gregor went out, he usually had 3 horses to ride. Gregor also ordered a guard to buy a small bucket of wildfire from a street store. Amidst the witch's cursing and stamping, Gregor poured the wildfire on the roof of the witch's plank house, and then threw a torch on it. The fire immediately burned up. People on the street carried buckets of water, but no one dared to put out the fire. It was not until the fire spread and was about to burn through the narrow passage and burn the neighboring houses that Gregor shouted to leave. So, a carriage and an ox cart began to drive out of this street, with 8 guards protecting them on the left, right, front, and rear, their hands on the hilts of their swords, and people stepped aside. Gregor and Jane rode side by side next to the carriage the witch was riding in. After they left, everyone quickly put out the fire. The flames were quickly extinguished, but the smoke had already soared into the sky. The witch suddenly lifted the curtain and pointed at Gregor, cursing, "Die, Mountain! I want to eat snow salt roasted meat, and I will always refuse to use chopsticks when dining. I only use iron utensils." "Okay," Gregor said politely. "I also want to wear silk clothes. The silk from Karth is the best quality. I will definitely send someone to buy you the best silk from Karth at the trading market in Lannisport." "Grandmother, did you live in Karth when you were young?" The witch ignored Gregor's question. "Gregor, I also want 3 servants, 1 to grind medicine, collect herbs, refine medicine, and taste medicine for me, 1 to wash and comb my hair, draw water for bathing, wash clothes, and cook, and 1 to clean the September, clean the room, take care of the September's torches, add holy oil, and be an assistant during ritual prayers." "Grandmother, everything will be done according to your wishes. I also want a helper." The witch brushed aside her long hair, and her pale yellow eyes made Jane panic. "Gregor, your betrothed looks very good. Can you ask her if she is willing?" Chapter 66. Clegane Keep. The September of the 7. The witch stood on the 7-step platform, her washed long hair gleaming silvery as it draped over her shoulders, revealing a face dotted with white spots. Every 7 white spots formed a small circle, and her face was covered with these strange little circles. Gregor didn't understand what the white spot circles on the witch's face represented, but they looked awe-inspiring. The witch's complexion had also changed, becoming radiant. For some reason, her teeth, which should have all fallen out, had returned. What Gregor found eerie was that her teeth were all black. Each and every one of her teeth was black. At first glance, one might think she had no teeth at all. The one most astonished by the witch's transformation was Lord Gawain. At first glance, he thought the priest of the September of the 7 had been replaced. The witch, dressed in a black robe, stood ramrod straight, whereas yesterday, her back was bent, and she looked utterly decrepit. Compared to yesterday, the witch seemed 20 years younger. The witch that Gregor, Jane, and Lord Gawain had seen yesterday was not the witch's true face, but rather one of her facades, a face of frailty and weakness. Perhaps feigning weakness was also a test the witch had set for Gregor. Perhaps the witch had concealed many means and abilities to retaliate against Gregor. Maester Hallis stood on the step below the witch, and he would lead everyone in reciting the oath before the witch. Today, 2 things would happen in the September of the 7. The first was to have the 7 witness Gregor bestowing knighthood upon the executioner Dunsen and the loyalist Polliver, and granting them the Clegane surname. The second was to have nearly 100 miners swear an oath before entering Gold Leaf Bay to mine: they would not steal gold, they would not slack off, they would not desert halfway, they could not take leave, they could not go home, they would not reveal anything untoward they saw, and everything would be kept secret. The 60 riders all watched with envy and excitement as Dunsen and Polliver knelt on one knee before Gregor, following Maester Hallis in reciting the knight's oath, beginning with the declaration of the 8 knightly virtues: humility, honesty, compassion, valor, justice, sacrifice, honor, and soul. Then came the oath song. I swear to the heavens, to make my will known. Not to bully the weak, to live with humility. In every battle I face, not to fear the strong enemy. Against all that is evil, I will raise my banner. For women and children, this battle is fought. For those imprisoned and seeking help, I will lend my strength. Women are delicate, and should never be violated. Colleagues and comrades, I will strive to support. To friends, be sincere, and act as a gentleman. To my beloved, I will be forever faithful. Polliver's voice was practically a roar as he swore the oath, his face flushed red. Dunsen, on the other hand, was unhurried and calm. Although his voice was drowned out by Polliver, he maintained his own tone and rhythm. Gregor doubted that Polliver even understood the meaning of the words in the knight's oath song, such as women are delicate, and should never be violated. In his band of rogue riders, including himself in the past, the sight of a common woman with even a little beauty was like a bone to a hungry dog. But thinking about his own knightly honor, which Prince Rhaegar had bestowed upon him when he was 16, he had raped Rhaegar's wife and smashed Rhaegar's son to death only a year later. According to the knightly code, he had violated 2 of them: not to bully the weak, to live with humility, women are delicate, and should never be violated. Among the knights of the 7 kingdoms, Gregor believed that, apart from Eddard Stark of the north and his sons, only Brienne Tarth of Tarth and Tyrion Lannister of the Westerlands truly embodied the knightly spirit. But the knightly spirit was not important. What was important was that these guys had to be absolutely loyal to Gregor. The term knight originally referred specifically to cavalrymen who had received formal military training, but later evolved into a title of honor used to denote a social class. A knight's status was not inherited, but rather an honorary title earned through excellence in character, mastery of horsemanship, and bravery in combat. Knights belonged to the lowest rung of the nobility. The most valued quality of a knight was loyalty, followed by sacrifice, and only then valor. Gregor agreed with the requirements for knightly qualities. Sweet Raff, the executioner Dunsen, and the loyalist Polliver all met these 3 conditions. After Maester Potter led Dunsen and Polliver in swearing the oath, Gregor forcefully drew his great sword, holding it effortlessly in one hand. He tapped the sword tip on Dunsen and Polliver's left and right shoulders, then gently pressed it on their heads, laughing loudly: Rise, Sir Dunsen Clegane, and you, Sir Polliver Clegane. Dunsen and Polliver stood up, embracing each other tightly, their hearts filled with joy that they couldn't control. Beside the cavalry, the clerk's eyes gleamed, filled with envy and resentment. While Gregor had taken the cavalry to Casterly Rock, the clerk had been responsible for all affairs inside and outside Clegane Keep. Whether it was the construction of Clegane Village, the quarrying of stone slabs in Stony September, or the management of the new territory and the registration of the new subjects after the Raven brought back news of the Duke's reward to Lord Gregor, he had completed it all with the assistance of Maester Potter. The clerk, Mark, was not one of Gregor's riders, he was the steward of Gregor's territory, in charge of all affairs. When Gregor was away, he managed all matters of the territory, from purchasing food for daily life to the inventory of the armory and the horses' fodder in the stables. Everything, big or small, was his responsibility. The clerk also longed for Lord Gregor to promote him to knighthood and grant him the Clegane surname. He knew he had to do an even better job to attract Lord Gregor's attention. Thus, the Clegane family had gained 2 more knights. The witch beckoned Duncan and Polliver to step onto the 7-step platform. The witch held a bone needle in her hand. With a light prick, she pierced Duncan's finger, and a drop of Duncan's blood clung to the needle tip. The witch stuck out her tongue and licked the needle tip, then glanced at Gregor. Although Gregor and the witch hadn't exchanged a word, Gregor understood what the witch meant. Duncan had passed the witch's test. Gregor needed Duncan to meet the 4 knightly qualities of valor, sacrifice, honor, and soul. As for the other 4 qualities of humility, honesty, compassion, and justice, they were not within Gregor's scope of consideration. Subsequently, Polliver also successfully passed the witch's test. Miss Jane, the witch's temporary helper, stood beside her, holding a bowl of holy oil. The witch smeared the holy oil on Duncan and Polliver's foreheads, and the ceremony officially ended. Afterward, all the miners swore an oath before the statues of the 7, and after the witch's holy oil was applied, the clerk led the team of miners to Gold Leaf Bay to mine for gold. Gregor said, "Sir Duncan, you will lead 40 riders to supervise the miners. Collect all the formed gold nuggets and grains that are mined, and do not allow any miner to stuff them into their pockets. Each day, the riders will take turns entering the mine to dig and pan for gold, while also supervising the workers underground." "Yes, Lord." Duncan's tone was full of fighting spirit. He was still thrilled after just becoming a knight. "Julie Clegane. Here, father. You will take 10 riders to urge the construction workers to finish building Clegane village as soon as possible. The village must be expanded, and 20 more houses must be built. Patrol the territory's borders once every morning and evening." "Yes, father." "Sir Polliver, you will take 10 riders and come with me. We will go to King's Landing tomorrow on business." "Yes, Lord." Polliver was overjoyed. The bald, black-bearded man smiled neurotically. Chapter 67. The night was already quite deep. Most people had already drifted off to sleep. "TOC, TOC, TOC." A polite knock sounded on Jenny's door. Jenny was lounging lazily in bed. Today, she had assisted her grandmother with experiments on potions. Only when her grandmother told her to rest did she realize it was dark, and only then did she realize how excessively tired she was from the day. She had simply been engrossed in the magical reactions of the potions, forgetting her physical fatigue. Jenny opened the door to find the mature and dignified Mrs. Allen standing there. She was a steward of Clegane, in charge of the kitchen's firewood, rice, oil, salt, and everyone's meals. Jenny had a good impression of Mrs. Allen. Mrs. Allen's late husband had been a knight, and she possessed excellent manners. "Miss Jenny, Sir Gregor requests your presence." "Now?" Jenny glanced outside, noting the late hour. "Yes, now. The knight is waiting for you." Mrs. Allen wore a smile, her demeanor graceful. All right." Jenny said. "Please wait for me a moment, madam. I'll be ready shortly." "Yes, miss." Tomorrow, Sir Gregor would take Sir Polliver and 10 mounted soldiers to the Royal Mint in King's Landing to apply for the rights to mine gold, request the minimum and maximum amounts of ore that must be submitted each month, and obtain an official document assessing the ore's quality. No one in the 7 kingdoms had the right to mint coins or gold. Gold ore had to be handed over to the mint outside King's Landing, and then the treasury officials would provide gold dragon rewards based on the ore's quality and quantity submitted. The king monopolized the minting of gold coins. The gold mines of the Westerlands were all brought to the king's mint, where the gold was extracted and then minted into coins. The highest official in charge of minting, approving gold ore mining rights, and assessing ore quality was Peter Baelish, known as Littlefinger. Gregor's official trip would take him along the Gold Road, a journey of 2,000 miles. A round trip would take at least 20 days. Although a good horse could travel 1,000 miles a day and 800 at night, such horses were rare, perhaps 1 in 1,000. This wasn't a military forced march, a party of 12 would be doing well to cover 300 miles a day. Jenny didn't know why Gregor was looking for her so late at night. It was a very personal matter, she was his betrothed, and he was notorious for his behavior with women. Sir Gregor, you wanted to see me. Although Jenny's beautiful face held a smile, her tone carried a hint of trepidation. Basically, everyone was asleep, including her father, who was upstairs. Mrs. Allen had escorted her to Gregor's huge bedroom and then left. If Gregor wanted to do something to her, she would be nothing more than a helpless lamb. Jenny, I drew something. Take a look. Gregor noticed Jenny's restraint and tried to relax his inherent ferocious aura, smiling softly and looking at her with gentle eyes. What's this? Jenny picked up a piece of parchment from the table. Gregor had drawn a diagram with clear lines on the parchment. Jenny recognized it as a pipe with a curve in the middle. A water trap, Gregor said. Jenny stared at Gregor with a puzzled expression. She didn't understand at all and had never heard the name before. Water flows in here, and because there's an upward bend, water will be trapped in the curve. Jenny listened carefully and looked intently. But if there's a little more water, as long as this end is raised, the water trap can only ever hold a little water in the bend. The excess will flow away, because the pipe is open at both ends. That's right. So what do you want to do with this? Install it in the toilet to replace the straight-through sewage pipes that people are used to. The toilet? Replace straight-through sewage? Won't the waste get stuck in the bend? Jenny's finger pointed to the curved part of the pipe. No, because the other end is higher, the waste stuck in the bend will be forcibly flushed away by the water. The pressure of the water is considerable. Water pressure is a simple physical concept. But there will always be some water remaining in the bend. Gregor smiled. That's right, that's the beauty of designing the bend. Install this pipe vertically, with a high water volume, and any waste at the bend will be flushed away. The remaining clean water will block the opening of the bend, and the water will cut off the airflow in the pipe. The odors from the toilet bowl won't enter the room through the sewage pipe. Jenny's eyes, already large, widened even further. She stared blankly at Gregor, her eyes full of surprise. No matter how clean the Duke's toilet or the King's toilet is, there's always that odor in the air. If there's a strong wind, and the cesspool isn't covered properly, the stench will enter the room through the sewage pipe. Even without wind, there's always a smell entering the room through the toilet pipes. Jenny nodded like an elementary school student. Everyone was like this, and everyone knew it. This was common sense. So, whether it was a commoner's or a noble's toilet, it was always built in the most remote corner, and the door was always closed tightly to prevent the wind from carrying the smell into other rooms. Designing a bend in a straight pipe won't block the waste, but it will block the odor from entering the room through the pipe. This way, even a small, separate toilet can be designed in the bedroom, as long as the water trap is buried underground. It's just that each time after using the toilet, a little more water may need to be flushed. Jenny was so shocked by Gregor's brainwave that she couldn't speak. She knew that what Gregor was saying was entirely feasible. How did you think of this? Jenny heard her voice sounding a little ethereal. She didn't think Gregor could come up with something that seemed so simple but was actually very clever and ingenious. The name water trap was also very appropriate. I didn't think of it. You did, Gregor said with a smile, handing the drawing to Jenny. I'm a crude villain, illiterate and slow-witted. I couldn't come up with something like this. All right, it's getting late. You should go to sleep. Tomorrow, take this drawing to the master craftsman and tell them that all the toilets in Clegane village, the toilets in the September, and the ladies' private toilets must be fitted with this type of water trap underground. You want to give me this invention? You're talented, intelligent, and surpassingly clever. These little things should have been your ideas in the first place. I won't take credit for your work. It's not taking credit, it's helping me. If Sir Gregor is known to be getting smarter day by day and constantly favored by the light of the seven gods, I'm afraid many people will be jealous of me, wary of me, vigilant of me, and even want to get rid of me, Gregor said seriously. But you're different. You come from a noble family and are multi-talented. If this is your idea, others won't be wary of me because they're afraid. Jenny looked at Gregor, her big eyes shining. Sir Gregor, you're completely different from the villain in the rumors. You're not crude. The people who slander you are crude. On the contrary, you're very shrewd and full of wisdom. Not wisdom, but cunning. Gregor decided to take the opportunity to be sentimental. After all, He had watched so many melodramatic dramas in his previous life, and he still remembered some of the disgusting lines. "Jenny, you're my betrothed. We're the most important people in each other's lives. I really can't stand the odor coming from the toilet passage, especially when the weather is hot. Since I thought of a way to solve this problem, I'll do it. But this time, you'll have to bear the false reputation for me. In front of others, I must hide my cleverness." In other words, in front of Jenny, he was a frank man. "All right, I'll help you. This water trap was my idea, and I invented it," Jenny said with a serious little face that looked very charming. "However, I won't take it out the day after you leave. I'll wait a little longer." "Great." Gregor smiled. Chapter 68. King's Landing, the capital of the Seven Kingdoms. King's Landing has three things in abundance. First, brothels. Peter Baelish, master of coin and a member of the small council, owns the most brothels in the city. His brothels are divided into two tiers. The highest tier caters to royalty, nobles, the hand of the king, and the king himself. The second tier caters to knights and lords. The city is built upon three hills, crisscrossed with streets and houses. Wherever there is a bustling street, there is one of Littlefinger's brothels. Second, people. King's Landing has a permanent population of over 500,000. Coupled with the fact that it boasts the second largest port on the continent and is the central hub of the Seven Kingdoms, serving as the core for national culture, politics, and trade, King's Landing attracts the largest influx of transient people in the Seven Kingdoms. Third, garbage. Garbage is everywhere in the streets, the stench permeates the air, causing disgust. It is famous throughout the Seven Kingdoms, so King's Landing has another name, Trash City. Even outside the city walls, you can smell the stench from within. The mountains of garbage in the city are mainly concentrated in Flea Bottom, south of the Iron Gate and Dragon Pit Hill. Flea Bottom is where the poor of King's Landing gather. North of Flea Bottom, across the hill, is King's Landing's famous Old Town, also the wealthy district. Merchants from various countries, high-ranking officials of King's Landing, nobles and wealthy people all own their private villas in Old Town, north of Flea Bottom. Littlefinger Peter has three of his highest-end brothels located in the wealthy district. Every night, Littlefinger sits in his largest brothel in the wealthy district, auditing the accounts. Managers from brothels all over the city bring the previous day's earnings and account books to this brothel at a scheduled time for Peter Baelish to review. This rule of submitting the previous day's accounts has been in place for 2 years. To describe Littlefinger's income as making a fortune every day is no exaggeration. Peter is not tall, but not short either, of average height and slender build, which makes him look capable and shrewd. He has handsome features, and a signature mischievous smile often plays on his lips, as if he is mocking the shallowness of the entire world. He has grey-green eyes, a small black beard on his chin, and some grey hair mixed in with his dark hair. Littlefinger is very particular about etiquette and noble manners. He is always dressed impeccably, with the mockingbird pin representing the Baelish family crest clipped to a noble and exquisite robe that highlights his status. The robe is always pinned diagonally on the right side of his body, making him look like a true nobleman. It was time to collect money and review the account books again. The madam from Mudgate, the farthest away, always arrived the earliest and was Littlefinger Peter's most appreciated assistant. As the madam slipped in through the brothel's small back door, Littlefinger's pale green eyes widened, and his voice became slightly hurried. "Where's my money?" This was the first thing Littlefinger asked. The madam's lips were broken, several teeth were knocked out, she was covered in blood, her eyes were black and blue, the right side of her face was swollen high, and the shiny silk clothes on her body were torn to shreds, revealing the red undergarment inside. "Lord," the madam hurried over, fell to her knees at Littlefinger's feet with a thud, reached out and hugged Littlefinger's leg. "Lord, the money was robbed, and I was humiliated. You must notify the city watch and arrest those hooligans." The more the madam spoke, the more agitated she became, and she began to cry out in a drawn-out voice. "Shut up!" Littlefinger squatted down, restoring his elegant and capable demeanor. He smiled and said softly, "Listen, I have distinguished guests from across the narrow sea here. If you disturb even one of my guests, I will cut out your tongue and throw you into the lower brothels of Flea Bottom, ensuring that 20 foul-smelling men visit you every day." The madam immediately shut up, her tears and voice disappearing together. "Who did it?" "A knight who calls himself Poliver Clegane." The madam miraculously forgot the humiliation and pain, her words were clear, and her reaction was quick. but she couldn't hide the fear in her eyes. Lord, that guy is a monster. He said he would gouge out my eyeballs tomorrow and soak them in a wine jar to make an artwork. He said he liked my eyeballs, Lord. Littlefinger Peter naturally knew in his heart that the Clegane surname was not to be trifled with. What else did he say? He also said that if the Lord doesn't approve their matter tomorrow, he will. The madam didn't dare to continue, because what the knight named Polliver said was very unpleasant and revealed a very terrible evil. Lord, that guy doesn't look like a normal person. Anyone with the Clegane surname won't be a normal person. Speak quickly, what exactly did he say? Littlefinger smiled gently, with impeccable manners. But the madam shuddered. It was as if an invisible knife was pointed at her heart. Lord, he said, if the Lord doesn't give them the best ore grade, the highest price, and the most lenient delivery time, he will cut off the Lord's thing, and stuff it into the Lord's mouth. And he will also set fire to all the Lord's brothels. Littlefinger had already learned from his subordinate officials that this group of people had come empty-handed, without bringing any ore samples, but wanted the ore officials to set the highest ore standard for the ore they had not yet delivered. Without bringing the terrain map and ore estimation volume of Golden Grove, they wanted the officials of the mint to set a minimum and maximum standard of ore submission per month. In short, they provided nothing, but wanted the highest grade, the most expensive price, and an unreasonable high limit for ore submission. In Littlefinger's experience, this group of people would definitely not be able to deliver the quota in the end, and they would definitely put stones under the gold ore, just like the Serret family of Silver Hill in the Westerlands had done before. Did he say where they were staying? He said, they are staying at the Inn of the Kneeling Man on the Iron Street, the inn on the highest hill, next to the blacksmith shop of the Master Armourer Tipomot. Their lord, Gregor Clegane, is waiting for you for one night. After tonight, they will come here to find you. Good. I understand. Go, you don't need to compensate for the money you lost. Peter gently patted the madam's swollen face. Go back and work hard. I guarantee they won't harass you again. Don't worry, your eyeballs won't be soaked in the wine jar. Yes, Lord. The madam's body trembled slightly. Knock knock. Knock knock knock. Someone knocked on the door very politely. The door was pulled open, and a guy with a mouth full of alcohol breath glared fiercely. Who are you looking for? Littlefinger Peter Baelish smiled and said elegantly, I am looking for Lord Gregor Clegane. Oh. The other party turned around and left, the dagger and short knife hanging on his waist clanging, follow me. Littlefinger Peter Baelish walked into the gate, facing the booming sound of drinking, guessing, and ordering. A bunch of bastards with no rules or manners. Littlefinger followed the soldier in front of him and turned to the second floor. The entire inn was empty. Except for one place where people were making loud noises, there was no movement elsewhere. After all, the Mountain, the number one villain in the Seven Kingdoms, after he moved into this inn, everyone else could only get out. Sir Gregor, Littlefinger stood calmly in front of Gregor, now that you've come to King's Landing, you didn't even send someone to notify me, so I could arrange a few virgins from Lys for you to relieve your fire and kill your itch. Are you and your brothers used to staying here? If you don't like it here, I'll cover all the accommodation, banquets, and women. You and your brothers must have a good time. Gregor looked at the legendary Littlefinger Peter Baelish without saying a word, just glaring at him. Littlefinger didn't change his expression or his heartbeat. He was an unparalleled master in terms of conspiracy and trickery. Of course, what drove him to use his intelligence to the fullest was his even greater ambition. Chapter 69. Peter Baelish, Littlefinger, suddenly felt a chill in his heart. Gregor Clegane looked down at him, as if seeing through everything. It was as if he were naked in Gregor's gaze. The feeling was absurd, unbelievable, yet so very real. Gregor's gaze was arrogant, domineering, and sharp. But whether it was domineering or sharp, Littlefinger felt that it was all masking something that made him feel cold, scrutiny. Gregor was scrutinizing him, probing him, penetrating him, as if he were using his gaze to strip away Littlefinger's disguise, layer by layer, until he saw the deepest secrets of his heart. This feeling was incredible, yet Littlefinger felt it was very real. Indescribable, inexplicable, a strange and real feeling that even Littlefinger himself was unwilling to believe. If this feeling had come from Tywin Lannister, Littlefinger would not have doubted it at all. But coming from Gregor Clegane, Littlefinger found it absurd, contradictory, and unbelievable. Gregor's mind was as dull as rock, he was just a good knife in Tywin's hand. A good knife was not scary, but the person wielding the knife was. But now, he felt that even the good knife made him feel a little fear. How could he have such a feeling? Littlefinger treated with respect anyone who could involuntarily arouse fear in the depths of his heart. "Seize Lord Sheepshit," Gregor said. The feeling of being scrutinized, probed, and penetrated disappeared with Gregor's words. Immediately, a bald, black-bearded man with an obviously abnormal smile on his face came forward, drew a short knife with a whoosh, and reached out to grab Littlefinger. Littlefinger's territory was in the most remote eastern part of the Vale, on a peninsula that resembled the 5 fingers of a hand, so his territory was also known as the Fingers. The Fingers were all rock, with fewer than 10 fishing families. A type of moss that could feed sheep grew on the rocks of the peninsula, so sheep became the main livestock on the Fingers, and Littlefinger earned the nickname Lord Sheepshit. Gregor's territory in the Westerlands was looked down upon by the real nobles, but Littlefinger's family territory was 10 times poorer than Gregor's little place. Gregor called Littlefinger Lord Sheepshit, implying humiliation, just as if someone called him the Mountain to his face. However, Gregor didn't care at all when people called him the Mountain. The real Gregor, before being transmigrated, he liked people calling him the Mountain. But Littlefinger was different. The title that Littlefinger felt most humiliated by was Lord Sheepshit. He worked hard to climb up, scheming by any means, largely because he no longer wanted to be called Lord Sheepshit to his face. But now was not the time to argue with the Mountain about titles, because a short knife was coming at him. Any eloquent words or conspiracies could not stop a crude man from slashing his neck with a knife. Moreover, Polliver clearly did not look like a mentally normal person, his smile was full of evil, and he carried a fierce aura. "Sir Gregor," Littlefinger said with a smile. He was calm and composed, but his smile was a little forced. "Are you going to come with me yourself, or should I stab you once before you go?" Polliver said with a grin. Littlefinger only glanced at Polliver before immediately going over on his own. He could tell that this scumbag Polliver would definitely not repeat himself, and would definitely stab him without hesitation. This was a bunch of lawless desperados. Bang! Gregor kicked over the stool, reached out and swept all the cups, bowls, plates, basins, dishes, wine jars, etc. off the table. Before Littlefinger could react, several rogue-like soldiers swarmed up, like wolves and tigers, grabbing Littlefinger like an eagle grabbing a chick, or more like a hungry wolf grabbing a rabbit. Littlefinger had no resistance. In his exclamations of "Hey, hey, hey" as his expression changed drastically. Thump! Littlefinger was pressed onto the table, his right face pressed tightly against the tabletop, his neck twisted painfully, his shoulders felt like they were being crushed by mountains, and his waist was also pressed down by someone's knee, almost breaking his bones. He could not move his whole body. Not to mention speaking, even breathing was very difficult. Bang! The Mountain's huge foot stepped onto the table, his huge war boots were right in front of Littlefinger's nose, Littlefinger's eyes could only see the Mountain's black war boots, and his nose could only smell the dirt and leather of the boots. "Blood!" the Mountain said. The Mountain's voice was like muffled thunder, making Littlefinger feel afraid. Ooh! 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 Severe pain came from the tips of his fingers. Someone was using something sharp to pierce Littlefinger's fingers. The 10 fingers were connected to the heart. Littlefinger was in excruciating pain, but because his neck was also pressed down, his right half of his face was tightly pressed against the tabletop, and his whole body felt like it was being pressed by a mine. His throat could only make muffled whimpering sounds. The Mountain was an evil man who had raped and killed the queen, and even smashed the prince in swaddling clothes to death against the wall. Littlefinger regretted being too confident. He thought he could easily solve the trouble brought by the Mountain with his glib tongue. He realized he had underestimated things. "All right, release Lord Sheepshit." The Mountain's voice revealed satisfaction. The force pressing down on Littlefinger suddenly loosened, and Littlefinger remained in this position lying on the table for a while before he could catch his breath. He felt like he had been kneaded into the wood of the table. Littlefinger straightened up and saw Gregor holding a thin glass vial filled with blood. His blood. Littlefinger didn't know what Gregor wanted to do with his blood. He looked at his fingers, all 5 of which had been pierced by steel needles and were still dripping blood. His fingers no longer hurt, because his whole hand was numb. "Lord Sheepshit, the gold mine I hand over each month ranges from 100 to 1,000 carts, 3 gold dragons per cart, with 1/3 of stones placed at the bottom." Gregor gently shook the glass bottle containing Littlefinger's blood. "It's settled then." He made a final decision, brooking no argument. 4 gold dragons per cart, the treatment of Duke Tywin. All right, Sir Gregor. Littlefinger's eloquence and wit were 10 times higher than Gregor's, but he knew it was best to leave here now. To argue with this madman, it was best to be in the throne room, or in a place with the royal guard. Get out! Gregor waved his hand. That nervous, tall, bald guy came up, the short knife in his hand so bright that Littlefinger felt a chill in his heart. If this knife stabbed into his stomach, Littlefinger's painstakingly managed dreams would be terminated. Littlefinger maintained his aristocratic demeanor and decided to say a polite farewell. He said to Gregor, Sir Gregor. Before he could finish speaking, Gregor frowned. Polliver, Lord Sheepshit said 2 extra words, slap him twice. Slap. Slap. Polliver delivered 2 loud slaps, so fast and so heavy that Littlefinger was dizzy, both sides of his face feeling the same, burning pain. Polliver, if Lord Sheepshit dares to say another word, cut off his tongue. Yes, my lord. Polliver looked at Littlefinger with anticipation, a fervent expression on his face, but he was soon disappointed. Littlefinger had already strode out, running quickly downstairs. Power is the truth. Absolute power represents absolute truth. Chapter 70. Clang. 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 This was the rhythm of the street of steel at night. Many blacksmiths hammered iron even in the middle of the night. In some busy seasons, like when taking on a job from a mercenary band, it was common for blacksmith shops to work all night long. But there was one exception. There was a famous blacksmith shop on the street of steel whose master was named Topomot. He was the only one among the hundreds of blacksmith masters in King's Landing who could infuse pigments into steel. Topomot was the only one with this technique of creating weapons in the colors specified by the customer. Topomot's blacksmith shop never took orders at night, nor did it forge weapons or armor at night. He rested at night. This was his rule, and Topo's weapons were also the most expensive on the street of steel. Whether it was long swords, daggers, short knives, or helmets, gorgets, armor, leg guards, front and back breastplates, they were all more expensive than elsewhere. Few mercenaries could afford a full set of armor, many could only afford a helmet, along with some gorgets and leg guards. Nevertheless, many people came to Topo's blacksmith shop to buy weapons and armor. Topo had a great reputation. Topomot had a blacksmith apprentice named Gendry. Gendry was 14 years old this year, but he had the height of an adult man. His muscles were strong, his lips were thick, he was powerfully built, and he had blue eyes and a thick head of black hair. Although Topomot wanted to drink and sleep at night, that didn't mean his apprentice could do the same. Gendry had to forge iron billets at night. The quality of the iron billet was directly related to the quality of the weapon or armor. If other blacksmith shops forged an iron billet 100 times, Topo's requirement for Gendry was 300 times. An iron billet that others would shape and pass after 100 strikes, Topo required to be worked 200 more times. The work of forging iron billets was very hard. Every swing of the hammer required Gendry to use all his strength and skill. Although Gendry was only 14 years old, he was already a true master of forging iron billets and crafting various weapons, and he had secretly learned Master Topo's technique of forging colored weapons. His master never explained anything about weapon crafting to Gendry. Gendry had to watch, think, ponder, and experiment on his own. There had been no verbal transmission of weapon crafting techniques between the two masters and apprentices for many years. But Gendry learned better and faster than any other apprentice in any other blacksmith shop. This child had a talent for ironworking, appearing rough on the surface but being meticulous at heart. Without exception, Gendry continued to forge iron billets after his master had comfortably fallen asleep. He had to work until midnight before he could sleep. All the dirty work, hard work, chores, and basic tasks in the blacksmith shop were undertaken by Gendry alone. Unless a customer specifically requested Master Topo to craft a weapon himself, even customer orders were now completed solely by Gendry. Master Topo would just watch from the side, holding his teacup, without saying a word. In the beginning, if the weapons Gendry crafted were not acceptable to the customer, Gendry himself had to start over, squeezing out time from his meals to work overtime and redo them. The arduous life had forged Gendry into a physique that surpassed his peers, and it had also given him tremendous strength. At the same time, perhaps due to the furnace fire and his master's cold silence, Gendry had developed a very stubborn personality. He was becoming increasingly stubborn, whether towards customers or his master. Clang! 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 Master Tipo slept soundly and sweetly in the sound of Gendry's forging of iron billets. Blacksmiths were accustomed to sleeping comfortably in the loud sounds of hammering iron. The residents of the Street of Steel were also accustomed to the blacksmith's incessant clanging day and night. But there must be some who were not accustomed to it. Just as Gendry was engrossed in forging iron billets, someone knocked on the blacksmith shop's door. The blacksmith shop's door would not be closed before Gendry went to sleep. Tap, tap, tap. Someone was knocking on the door. Gendry grunted and remained silent, continuing to forge his iron billet. He had seen more and more mercenaries and tyrannical people, but he simply ignored them. He only focused on doing his own work. Collecting money, discussing business, and receiving guests were all his master's affairs and had nothing to do with him, Gendry. Who would come knocking on Master Tipo's blacksmith shop door at this time? Did they not know Tipo's rule of never taking orders at night? Since they didn't know the rules, they were not experienced mercenaries or city guards, but just a novice soldier, a greenhorn who didn't understand the rules. Gendry ignored both veterans and recruits. He continued to hammer his iron billet, strike after strike. His shoulder muscles, glistening with sweat in the light of the furnace fire, shone like gold. His figure was a work of art with perfect muscle lines. Someone's eyes were staring intently. He loved those strong, perfect muscle lines. This person's eyes were staring brightly, like a cat's eyes in the dark night. He wanted to soak Gendry's entire body in a large wine vat and turn him into a work of art. The person who had silently entered the blacksmith shop was Sir Polliver Clegane from the neighbouring inn. He had knocked on the door several times, but the fellow in the blacksmith shop didn't even look up, hear, or pay attention. It wasn't until Polliver's hand touched the knotted muscles of Gendry's back that Gendry suddenly turned his head, his eyes wide with anger. What? Gendry's personality was like the iron billet under his hammer. The higher his blacksmithing skills, the stronger his stubborn personality became, tempered like a shaped iron billet, strong and hard. Such perfect muscles, Polliver's eyes gleamed, and he licked his lips with his tongue, looking very lewd. No orders at night, Gendry said sullenly. He felt that this bald, tall man was not normal, but like a crazy person who should be locked up. Gendry feared nothing, but he was afraid of mentally unstable people. Polliver looked Gendry up and down, making admiring tisk-tisk sounds. He walked around Gendry several times. Sir Polliver, a voice said at the door, you have to tell this kid to stop hammering and pay us money. He's disturbing the rest of the Lord and the brothers. The Lord is still waiting for our reply. Polliver's eyes flickered, as if he had returned to reality from a hazy fantasy. He remembered the words Lord Gregor had instructed, which was an order he had to complete. He stared at Gendry's muscles reluctantly. Boy, the sound of your hammering is disturbing our Lord's rest. You pay us 10 gold dragons and stop hammering, and we'll call it even. Gendry's bull-like eyes widened instantly. He looked Polliver up and down, not saying a word, and suddenly swung his hammer, striking the iron billet with a clang. If Polliver hadn't dodged quickly when the hammer swung, he would have been grazed by it. Clang! 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 With 3 consecutive hammer blows, Gendry hammered even harder on the iron billet, then squinted at Polliver, full of disdain. Polliver's eyes went wide again. He was once again conquered by the muscular tension and perfect muscle lines of Gendry swinging the hammer. He fell in love with Gendry's body, which contained explosive power. Tap, tap, tap. Several cavalrymen with evil auras, fierce looks, and cruel gazes walked in. The 3 loud hammer blows of Gendry's provocation had not angered Polliver, but they had enraged them. A mere blacksmith apprentice dared to defy them. They were Lord Mountain's men. Chapter 71. Hey! What do you think you're doing? Polliver spread his hands, yelling at the group of vicious-looking men. Don't scare the little brother. The arrogant soldiers immediately lost their bluster, stopping in their tracks, but glaring fiercely at Gendry, their eyes full of warning. Clang! Gendry swung his hammer again, striking the iron ingot. This was his response to Polliver and the others. He, little brother, what will it take for you to stop? Polliver asked ingratiatingly, his face plastered with a fawning smile. Clang! Another skillful and perfect strike. Hey, little brother, this isn't a good way to solve problems, Polliver lowered his voice. I'm a good person, easy to talk to, kind-hearted, but if my lord comes here himself, he'll tear this place down. Polliver spoke in a cautious tone, as if telling a close friend a secret that couldn't be known by outsiders. He even looked around, as if afraid of being overheard. Gendry felt goosebumps all over his body. Why did this guy always have to get so close when he talked? Gendry swung the hammer again, striking the iron ingot accurately with a clang. The strange fellow dodged the hammer's path again with skillful ease. As soon as the hammer fell, he nimbly stuck close again, his eyes on Gendry's muscles as if he were looking at a delicious cat. He licked his lips from time to time, as if savoring something. Gendry felt a chill in his heart. He stopped swinging the hammer and said sullenly, "Only my master can make me stop." Whoosh! The hammer swung again. Clang! The hammer struck again. Under the heavy blow, the iron ingot trembled. "Oh, I understand." Polliver smiled politely, then turned and shouted to his men, "What are you standing around for? Go grab his master." "Yes, knight." The soldiers, like wolves and tigers, immediately rushed through a doorway. Bang! The soldier in the lead kicked the door open. Bang, bang, crash. The rapid sound of footsteps echoed on the stairs as they rushed upstairs. This was a 3-story building. The bottom floor was the blacksmith's shop, the second floor was Master Tapo's residence, and the small attic on the third floor was Gendry's small bedroom. "What are you doing?" Gendry exclaimed, shocked. He had seen many vicious mercenaries, but he had never seen anyone dare to break into Tapo's second floor. This was King's Landing. No matter who you worked for, few dared to cause trouble on the Street of Steel. Tapomont was not someone to be trifled with. If anything happened, the drunken king would be even harder to deal with. Although the king loved wine and women and neglected affairs of state, he was genuinely good to his people. "Hey!" Polliver said with a grin. "Little brother, what kind of weapon do you use?" Swish! Polliver drew the short sword from his waist. The short sword was bright, the blade reflecting the red light of the furnace, obviously a fine sword made of good steel. "What are you going to do?" Gendry's arm muscles bulged as he raised the hammer. "Your weapon is a hammer." Polliver licked his lips. "Excellent. Come on, if you can hit me even once, I'll let you go tonight." Whoosh! Polliver's sword was fast, drawing a cut on Gendry's arm with a single stroke. The feeling of the blade gliding across his skin sent a surge of anger through him. Whoosh! Gendry swung the hammer, aiming for Polliver's waist. Polliver was tall, so a horizontal swing was an easier way to hit him. It was difficult for Polliver to dodge by crouching, as the entire area of the hammer's horizontal sweep was within the range of attack. However, Gendry's angry strike missed, his opponent's agility exceeding his expectations. Polliver jumped back, nimble as a wolf. Gendry's hammer brushed past his body, but just barely missed. Gendry hadn't yet retracted the hammer. The hammer was heavy, with great momentum, and once swung, it couldn't be stopped mid-swing. Polliver nimbly dodged the hammer and stepped in front of Gendry. The sword in his hand casually pricked Gendry's arm again, stopping just short of injuring Gendry's bone. "Kid, let's make a bet. If you can't touch me 10 times in a row, you have to come with me." Gendry was stabbed again, his stubbornness flaring. He swung the hammer back around and slammed it towards Polliver's chest with a whoosh. This time, Gendry knew that his opponent was skilled in swordsmanship, agile, and highly skilled in martial arts, so he dared not hold back and attacked with all his might. Polliver saw it clearly, smiled, and dodged to the side as the hammer came crashing down, missing again. "One," Polliver said with a smile. He could see that this stubborn kid was strong, coordinated, and had nimble footwork, but it was obvious that he had never learned any real combat skills. Polliver slashed with his backhand, cutting Gendry's chest without even looking. Each time, he would retract his strength as soon as the blade made contact, unwilling to seriously injure Gendry. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Gendry swung 3 hammers in a row, all easily dodged by his opponent, while his body gained several more bloody cuts. When Polliver shouted 6, Gendry shouted, "Wait." Both of them were honest people. Polliver stopped as expected. Gendry dropped the hammer, rushed to the wall, and took down a battle axe. Polliver's eyes showed admiration as he said, "Not bad, not bad. The battle axe is lighter than the hammer. This way, your speed will be faster than before. The handle of the battle axe is also longer, so I'll need to distance myself further to dodge. It will be even more difficult to cut you." With 2 whooshing sounds, Gendry charged at Polliver with the battle axe. Sure enough, his speed was much faster than before. Polliver tried his best to dodge, and the short sword in his hand clashed, making a clang sound, and was knocked away. Gendry's brute strength was truly profound. Polliver laughed heartily. Gendry's stubbornness flared, and he swept the battle axe fiercely. Polliver dodged behind a pillar, and with a crash, the blacksmith's pillar was hit, swaying and creaking. "Knight, what are you still playing at? Let's go quickly," a dissatisfied voice said. These soldiers didn't have the obvious hierarchy and polite language of other legions, they were all desperate thugs. Polliver turned around and saw several soldiers with bruised noses and swollen faces. They had captured a similarly bruised and swollen man, who had already been subdued, his mouth stuffed with a black rag, his eyes filled with fear. Gendry was startled and shouted, "What are you doing? Put down Master Jabho!" He went straight for the soldiers. Suddenly, a heavy blow struck Gendry's head from behind. With just one blow, he was knocked unconscious. As his battle axe fell to the ground, he spun and fell, falling into someone's arms. Polliver said with a grin, "Little brother, you're very strong, but your martial arts are terrible. But, I can teach you in the future. Are the sacks ready?" "Ready. Carry him away." "Yes, sir." The group quickly went out, closed the door, locked it, and then posted a pre-prepared note on the door, "Closed for business. Knight, tell Sir Gregor about the matter we need to take care of tomorrow." "I'll go too." "All right." "Sir, is the lady Sir Gregor chose for you a virgin or a widow?" "I don't know. All I know is that we're going to snatch someone, just like today." Chapter 72. Esther hadn't learned to sing, but she was a girl with a naturally good voice. She had just come of age, with delicate features and a slender build, and had her first period last month. Esther and her grandfather, Boaz, sold their famous brown soup on the streets of Flea Bottom. Flea Bottom was the slum district of King's Landing. The name brown soup referred to the color of the soup, which was named after its yellowish-brown hue. Brown soup was made by boiling all sorts of things together in a large pot, throwing in whatever was available and simmering it repeatedly, turning vegetable leaves, meat, and shells into a mush. Then, anything that couldn't be boiled down, like shells, would be fished out completely, and water would be added to simmer it into a thick soup, sprinkled with salt. It tasted very good. For people who couldn't afford a proper meal, it not only filled their stomachs but also contained various nutrients and was very cheap, costing only 5 copper pennies. 5 copper pennies were equivalent to about 5 cents in Earth's civilization. Brown soup was a major specialty of Flea Bottom's streets. Esther's family's brown soup sold very well, it tasted fresher than the brown soup of other vendors. She and her grandfather had set up a rat trap in their shack in Flea Bottom, a small bucket with a bit of meat inside. A thread was tied to the meat, which was connected to a small stick. As soon as a rat jumped into the bucket and pulled the meat, the stick would move, and the iron lid would fall, trapping the rat inside. There were a lot of rats in the Flea Bottom tenements. Sometimes, if they were lucky, they could catch a large, fat rat. Esther and her grandfather would catch the rats, skin them, remove the entrails, wash them clean, chop the snow-white rat meat into small pieces, and boil it into the old soup, giving the brown soup a meaty flavor. In the evening, Esther and her grandfather would go to the Mudgate fish market to scavenge for rotten fish and shells in the garbage heaps. They would cut off the rotten parts, pick out the edible fish meat and shells, remove the fish bones, and throw them into the old soup to boil. As for the unwanted garbage vegetables they picked up from the vegetable market, they carefully picked off the blackened and rotten parts, leaving the good, edible portions, chopped them into small pieces, and threw them into the brown soup to boil. Esther's family's brown soup was clean and flavorful, completely different from the brown soup of other vendors. Other vendors' brown soup had more and larger pieces of meat than Esther's, but the meat inside was not clean. No one dared to delve too deeply into what kind of meat it was. Everyone knew in their hearts that the meat was from dead people. Flea Bottom had no shortage of people who died from illness, starvation, or fighting. Boiling dead people's meat into brown soup was a phenomenon that everyone here was aware of but no one talked about. Before Esther and her grandfather, Boaz, came to sell brown soup, people who came to drink brown soup would drink it in silence, not asking what kind of meat it was or where it came from. Although the soup was, not to be investigated too closely, it was cheap, and more importantly, a bowl of brown soup could save the lives of the homeless and the poor. But since Esther and her grandfather, Boaz, came to sell brown soup, many people who drank brown soup came to Esther's stall to drink it. Because Esther and her grandfather also drank the soup themselves every day. This reassured everyone. And the other vendors who sold brown soup did not drink the brown soup they made themselves. 5 copper pennies, standing, for a large bowl of brown soup. It warmed the body, filled the stomach, and provided nutrition. Grandfather Boaz was originally a worker in the mint, said to be a master responsible for casting various coin models. In addition, he was also responsible for grinding and polishing the formed coins. Coins had to be ground and polished before they could be circulated on the market. He was kicked out by the mint officials because he was old and slow. Boaz had no one to rely on. His only son was a gambler who did nothing but gamble and visit brothels or get into street fights. His only granddaughter, Esther, depended entirely on her grandfather's meager salary from the mint. After Boaz was kicked out of the mint, he took his granddaughter Esther to the gathering place for the poor, Flea Bottom. After renting a single, low shed, he spent 3 months guarding Littlefinger's brothel entrance waiting for him. Littlefinger, Peter Baelish, was the highest-ranking official in the mint. Master Boaz hoped that Lord Peter could give him a retirement allowance. Boaz had worked in the mint for more than 50 years and didn't even receive his last month's salary when he was kicked out by the officials, let alone the retirement money he should have received. 3 months later, he finally waited for Lord Peter Baelish once. Lord Peter Baelish didn't give him a single copper penny, but he gave him the opportunity to set up a brown soup stall on the streets of Flea Bottom. From then on, among the dozen or so brown soup stalls on the streets of Flea Bottom, a pair of grandparents and granddaughter squeezed in. Before long, because of Esther and grandfather Boaz's clean, tidy, and flavorful brown soup, their business surpassed that of the other vendors. Every day, only after Esther and grandfather Boaz's soup was sold out would the other vendors' business pick up. The grandparents and granddaughter never used rotten, inedible vegetable leaves or that unspeakable meat to make soup. They broke the unspoken vicious cycle, and brown soup could be made clean, flavorful, and safe to eat. But this was not a good thing. Grandfather Boaz and Esther had already had several conflicts with the surrounding vendors. Although they had all ended without incident, it was clear that if they continued to do business, these people would not make it easy for them. Littlefinger, Peter Baelish, had only shown his face on the first day the grandparents and granddaughter set up their stall and had never come again. The vendors who dared to set up stalls selling brown soup in Flea Bottom were not ordinary people, either they had the support of local thugs, or they had connections with fierce mercenaries, or they were familiar with and had friendships with the local petty officials. It was the first time that someone like the Boaz grandparents and granddaughter had squeezed in here based on the face of a master of coin. As time passed, and Littlefinger, Peter Baelish, did not appear again, many people saw the signs that the grandparents and granddaughter had no special relationship with the master of coin, Littlefinger. Thus, conflicts began. Flea Bottom was also the most chaotic place in the entire city. At night, outsiders generally dared not enter those alleys. King's Landing had the largest floating population in the 7 kingdoms, far exceeding Old Town in the south. Even mercenaries from across the narrow sea tried to avoid the streets of Flea Bottom at night. However, as long as it was daytime, although there were many fights in Flea Bottom, the street where brown soup was sold was generally safe. This seemed to be a kind of divine rule in the dark. After all, it was a place where the homeless, the poor, the pitiful retired old workers, the sick poor, etc., could drink a bowl of soup. The poorer and more mixed the population, the more violence there was. Because the rent was cheap in Flea Bottom, low-level mercenaries also rented here in good locations. More often, gangsters from various gangs also lived here. They liked to steal from the rich and sneak in here to hide. One morning, a mercenary came to Esther and grandfather Boaz's stall to drink brown soup. This mercenary was not from the 7 kingdoms but from across the narrow sea. He was bald, wearing a single shirt and thin trousers, with an Iraq curved sword at his waist. This bald man was a member of the Company of the Rose, a member of the Windblown, a mercenary band with a very bad reputation. He came from across the narrow sea and was a Dothraki who was good at using curved swords. The Windblown was one of the largest and most notorious mercenary companies in King's Landing. This company also had a chilling name, the Bloody Mummers. Chapter 73. A customer came to the little girl Esther's stall early in the morning. He was bald, with a black beard, and his eyes stared intently at people, occasionally gleaming as he looked at someone's buttocks, hands, face, or eyes. Only when the person being stared at noticed, avoided, and moved away would he reluctantly withdraw his gaze. This person was very tall. He wasn't wearing a helmet or a neck guard, just some simple armor protecting his arms and calves. His chest and back weren't armored either, only covered with leather protection. The only armor this neurotic fellow had was very well made, obviously crafted by an experienced blacksmith using the best steel. He had a sword belt around his waist, with a long sword, short sword, dagger, and steel spike hanging from it. The brown soup stall didn't have seats, customers either stood and drank or squatted on the street to drink. But this first customer wanted to sit while he drank. Esther and her grandfather Booze could tell that this person was not to be trifled with, so they gave up their stools. Esther and her grandfather Booze each had a stool so they could sit and rest during breaks from serving customers. This guy, who seemed to have something wrong with his eyes, didn't consider himself an outsider and sat inside the stall to drink. Esther was very afraid of this man. Because whether he was drinking soup or doing anything else, his eyes always glanced at Esther. When Esther paid attention to him, the guy's eyes would meet hers, and he would always smile. That strange look was hard to describe as malicious, but it couldn't be called normal either. The little girl and her grandfather could only hope that this weird guy would finish his soup and leave soon. But this guy had an amazing appetite, drinking 5 bowls in a row without showing any signs of leaving. Customers came and went one after another, and the brown soup business was brisk. A large pot of brown soup was visibly decreasing rapidly. Meanwhile, the dozen or so stalls next door had only a few scattered customers, and many stalls hadn't even had their first customer yet. At this time, a mercenary speaking broken common tongue arrived. His name was Igo, a mercenary from the Brave Companions. The common people preferred to call the Brave Companions the Bloody Mummers. The Bloody Mummers were fond of 2 things when they captured people: first, cutting off hands, and second, cutting off feet. They used blood as entertainment and took pleasure in severed limbs. In addition, because they came from various places across the narrow sea, they wore unique clothing styles specific to their ethnic backgrounds, like the various costumes of actors on a stage, hence the Bloody Mummers' infamous reputation. If Gregor Clegane were here, he would know that the Bloody Mummers were the same group he had seen in the original story before he transmigrated. The ones who cut off Jaime Lannister's hand. Igo swaggered to the stall and threw a silver stag into the boiling pot of brown soup. "Little girl, I want this whole pot of brown soup." Shoo! The silver stag splashed soup when it landed in the pot, splattering on Polliver's face, who was sitting behind the stall studying Esther's waist. Polliver was stunned and only then noticed Igo, a Dothraki man who looked different from them. As soon as Igo threw the silver stag into the pot, the few customers standing in front of the stall drinking brown soup immediately put down their bowls and quickly slipped away. The poor people living in Flea Bottom had a special intuition and sensitivity to trouble. The owners of the dozen or so stalls around them all smiled. This Igo was the mercenary they had jointly paid to drive the grandfather and granddaughter away. The Bloody Mummers were known for their cruelty and bloodshed, but their reputation was quite good. Generally, once they took the money, they would strictly complete the task for the employer. Igo wasn't the only Dothraki Iraq-wielding mercenary in the Bloody Mummers. There were several exiled criminals, led by the Fat Zolo. This Igo was ranked last in the Bloody Mummers, but the fact that the dozen or so brown soup owners had jointly paid him to deal with the grandfather and granddaughter on the street was already a very generous gesture. Polliver, who had been waiting here on the mountain's orders for the grandfather and granddaughter to finish selling brown soup so he could finish work, was overjoyed when he heard this. He immediately stood up, wiped the brown soup from his face, and laughed. "Good, good, good, brother, all the brown soup here is yours, even the pot is yours." 1 silver stag, when converted, could buy 140 bowls of brown soup. And there were only 20-odd bowls of brown soup left in the large pot. Igo, who had come to make trouble, then noticed the large man behind the stall. Looking at his attire, he wasn't a member of the city watch, nor was he a soldier under a noble, but most likely a mercenary. Professional soldiers under nobles had standard equipment such as armor and helmets. Igo saw that this tall man only had a few pieces of armor and no family crest, so he was naturally a mercenary. Among all the mercenary groups in King's Landing, the Bloody Mummers ranked first in combat power and reputation. "Brother, I'm Igo of the Bloody Mummers. I've bought all the soup here, it's free for you to drink. After you finish drinking, hurry up and leave," Igo said arrogantly. As soon as the name of the Bloody Mummers was mentioned, he waited to see the other party collapse in fear and put on a flattering smile. Sure enough, the other party smiled, grinning. "Little sister Esther, old man Booze, let's go, we don't want this stall anymore. Let's go, let's hurry back and pack our things, and set off immediately. The name of the bloody mummers frightened Esther and Booze. The two didn't know if this neurotic bald, black-bearded man was also a member of the bloody mummers. They had been worried that they wouldn't be able to sell brown soup for long, because the surrounding stall owners had threatened to make them get lost, or they would deal with them. From the looks of it, retribution had really come. What the grandfather and granddaughter didn't expect was that the stall owners would spend a lot of money to hire a ruthless person from the bloody mummers. These stall owners hated the grandfather and granddaughter with a vengeance. The name of the bloody mummers made children cry at night in King's Landing. Polliver grabbed the old man and the little girl with his large hands, gently pulling and pushing them. The grandfather and granddaughter were so frightened that they didn't dare to say a word. The little girl Esther wanted to go back to get the copper coins in the drawer of the stall, but Grandfather Booze was frightened and tightly held her hand, hurrying away. The bloody mummers liked to cut off hands and feet the most, which was why they were so famous. They also had another name, foot hunters. The grandfather and granddaughter hurried away, and an Iraq suddenly appeared in front of them, blocking their path. Igo smiled insincerely, speaking with strange inflections and an SSE accent, but because he was speaking the common tongue of West Eros, the grandfather and granddaughter could barely understand. You think you can just leave like that? I've taken someone's money, old man. I just want your right hand so you won't be allowed to set up a stall here in the future. Whoosh! A cold light flashed, and the Iraq was like a ray of light, heading straight for the old man's right wrist. This strike was so fast. The Dothraki were a nation on horseback, their best skill was riding horses, and their most powerful combat weapon was the Iraq. Clang! A loud noise, sparks flew everywhere. A long sword suddenly blocked the Iraq, then the long sword circled and drew a semicircular arc, slashing diagonally, as fast as lightning, hitting Igo's left neck. This sword strike was extremely ruthless. The long sword slashed deeply, cutting off Igo's shoulder collarbone, almost splitting half of his chest. The long sword was deeply embedded in Igo's tall body, with a section of the blade exposed on both sides. Chapter 74. Igan let out a few Dothraki-sounding guttural noises that no one understood, and the Iraq in his hand fell with a clang, startling all the completely stunned people nearby once more. The people living in Flea Bottom had seen fights and brawls, white blades going in and red blades coming out, but they had never seen such a ruthless person. The force of this sword strike seemed to contain generations of blood feuds. However, the bald, black-bearded guy who had delivered such a vicious blow didn't have any viciousness on his face. Instead, he was grinning, holding the sword hilt in one hand and poking Igan's forehead with his little finger, again and again, laughing, "What's the bloody hand? Fall, 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 fall." Bang! Igan fell backward, his eyes wide open. Although he was dead, his body's functions were still twitching instinctively, causing his body to convulse. When the heart stops beating, the body's inherent vitality will delay complete death for a while. Esther and Grandpa Boaz watched in stunned silence, their breaths catching in their throats. Polliver calmly withdrew his longsword, wiped the blood off the blade on Igan's corpse, and sheathed it. He took out a black object, put it in his mouth, and blew. Peep! A very high-pitched whistle sound, with extremely far-reaching penetration, was something the people of King's Landing had never heard before. Soon, a carriage came galloping from the other end of the street. The driver was skilled, and the carriage stopped abruptly in front of Polliver, demonstrating the driver's extraordinary horse-controlling skills. Polliver reached out, picked up Esther, and threw her into the carriage. Grandpa Boaz was shocked, at a loss, and opened his mouth to shout for help, but he couldn't make a sound. Polliver laughed, "Old man, are you planning to stay and have the bloody hand chop off your hands and feet, or are you coming with us?" "You, I don't know you." Old man Boaz instinctively retreated. In the carriage, Esther's mouth had been covered, stopping her screams. The leg she had stretched out of the carriage was also dragged into the carriage's curtain. Polliver's right half of his face twitched spasmodically, he was like this when he was excited. He picked up the Iraq and took the scabbard from Igan's body. At the same time, the wide carriage curtain was pulled open, and a guy who obviously wasn't a good person jumped out of the carriage, grabbed Old Man Boaz around the waist without explanation, ran a few steps quickly, and threw him into the carriage with a bang. The old man felt his waist almost breaking, his pain reaching his heart. "Who are you, what do you want?" the old man managed to say, enduring the pain. However, No one answered him, and no one paid attention to him at all. The soldier jumped into the car and pushed the old man in very rudely. Polliver held the arak and pointed it at a dozen or so pale-faced, dumbfounded stall owners. You, drag this body to the street corner. He kicked Egan's body. Throw it into the garbage heap. Remember my name, I am Aaron Green, a knight from House Green of Grey Shield Isle in the southern reach. Polliver laughed, jumped into the carriage, and shrank into the curtain like a cat. Even after the carriage was out of sight, the dozen or so stall owners and the street idlers who were watching from afar remained motionless. They looked at Egan's body on the ground, knowing that this time the trouble was big. The bloody hand was not easy to mess with, but the other party seemed even harder to mess with. With just one sword strike, Egan of the bloody hand was killed. Although Egan was unprepared, the viciousness, swiftness, ruthlessness of that sword strike was something everyone had never seen before. A wide, luxurious carriage started from the streets of Flea Bottom and sped forward, out of Flea Bottom, and turned left onto a major city avenue. The Street of the Silent Sisters. At the end of the Street of the Silent Sisters was Triumphal Plaza, the intersection of the city's four main avenues. The carriage passed through Triumphal Plaza, turned right, and across the street was the towering gate of the famous Alchemists' Guild, inside which lived the pyromancers who specialized in studying wildfire. The carriage sped onto another major city avenue. The Street of the Gods. After passing the increasingly lively Cobbler's Square, the coachman lashed the whip fiercely in the air, and the two horses exerted force, heading straight out of the Gods' Gate. The avenue outside the Gods' Gate connected to the famous Golden Way. Beside the woods at the intersection of the Golden Way, the Mountain and 8 sturdy cavalrymen were waiting for the carriage. Among the cavalrymen were 2 people with obvious scars on their faces, Master Armourer Topomot and Armourer's apprentice Gendry. The 2 looked listless, appearing to have been dealt with by the Mountain and his party, and finally became honest and obedient. The carriage stopped, the curtain was pulled open, and Polliver jumped out of the carriage. The cavalryman driving the carriage and a cavalryman inside the carriage dismounted and paid their respects to Gregor Clegane. Lord Gregor, we have brought the little girl Esther and the old man Boaz. Polliver knelt on one knee, paying homage to the high and mighty Gregor Clegane. Gregor nodded. Polliver, good job, you invited Master Boaz so quickly. Gregor raised his right palm slightly upward, and Polliver and the 2 cavalrymen stood up. Polliver said with a grin, Lord, the little girl Esther has already had her moon's blood. Oh, you've already asked her? Yes, Lord. She was already a woman last month. Good, do you fancy her? Lord, if you want me to marry her, I will marry her. Polliver laughed. I am a knight, she is a commoner, she should feel unworthy. Gregor snorted, and the 10 cavalrymen laughed together. Armourer Topomot and Gendry were angry but dared not speak out. Gregor drew his long sword. The heavy sword was as light as a small stick in his hand. The long sword lifted the carriage curtain. Inside the carriage, the little girl Esther held Grandpa Boaz tightly. Gregor said, Little girl Esther, Master Boaz, don't be afraid, I am Gregor Clegane, this is Knight Polliver Clegane. Esther's father has already betrothed her to Knight Polliver, this is his betrothal letter, take a look. Gregor took out a parchment from his arms. Master Boaz, can you read? Boaz nodded. Good, Polliver, let Boaz take a look at Butte's letter. Polliver took the letter and threw it at the old man. The parchment rolled off the old man and fell into the carriage. Polliver, don't be disrespectful to the old man. After you and Esther get married, Master Boaz will be your grandfather. Okay. Polliver jumped into the car, picked up the parchment letter and handed it to Boaz. Boaz took it, looked at it, and couldn't say a word. Old man, don't blame your son Butte either. He was gambling in the arena opened by Fang and Rorge, lost a lot of money, and was about to have his neck bitten off by Fang. I went to pay off his gambling debts for him. The old man and the little girl were speechless, their eyes filled with tears, at a loss. Gregor continued, Old man Boaz, Polliver Clegane is a knight of the Clegane family, he is loyal, highly skilled in martial arts, and not bad to his own people. If you also agree to this marriage, I will take you and Esther to live in Clegane village, and then let Esther and Polliver get married in the September of the 7. From then on, you will be my Gregor's family and elder, and Esther will be my younger sister. If you don't agree to this marriage, I will have Polliver rape Esther here first, and then the carriage will take you to Clegane Keep to get married. Old man, do you agree or disagree with this marriage? State your position. The old man glanced at Polliver, who was eager to try, and then at his own weak little granddaughter, and he nodded mechanically. Armorer's apprentice Gendry's neck veins bulged, his bull's eyes widened, but he still dared not speak out. Although he had strength, any of the cavalrymen around him could easily kill him. Chapter 75. Gregor laughed and said, "Congratulations, congratulations, old man Booze. From now on, we are family." Booze was full of questions. He was an ordinary commoner with no special skills, a native of King's Landing. Why would the mountain from the Westerlands come to his home in King's Landing to try and become related? This was very strange and unreasonable. He looked at Topomot and Gendry. Topo was strong and sturdy, a very robust man, and Gendry was also muscular. Just by looking at his face, one could tell that he was a fearless child, but it seemed that they, like him, had been coerced by the mountain. "Sir Gregor, we are commoners, and my little granddaughter, Arya, has no special skills either. We are not worthy of such an honor." Gregor ignored the old man's rambling, interrupted him directly, and shouted, "Let's go, back to the Westerlands." He took the lead. A cavalryman jumped onto the purchased carriage. With the crack of the whip, the carriage rumbled, following behind the mountain. Polliver Clegane rode his horse beside the carriage, and behind the carriage were 9 fierce cavalrymen surrounding the master blacksmith Topomot and the blacksmith's apprentice Gendry. The group travelled along the Gold Road, travelling by day and resting by night, heading straight back to the Clegane lands in the Westerlands. King's Landing, the Red Keep, the throne room. Renly Baratheon, King Robert's younger brother, sat on the Iron Throne in the throne room. Renly Baratheon was born in 278 AC and was 21 years old this year. He was young and handsome, with charming blue eyes and shiny black hair draped over his shoulders. His smile was kind, and his words were gentle, making him very likable, but his older brother, Stannis Baratheon, had always thought he was too frivolous. If the master blacksmith Topomot, who had been abducted by the mountain, were here, he would be surprised at why his apprentice, Gendry, looked so similar to Renly Baratheon. Whether it was the eyes, forehead, lip contours, or face shape, they were extremely similar. It was just that one had short hair and a stubborn, reckless temperament, while the other had shoulder-length hair and an elegant, noble demeanor. King Robert Baratheon led 100 courtiers and the Queen north to Winterfell, leaving the city in the care of his younger brother, Renly Baratheon. This made Robert's second brother, Stannis Baratheon, very dissatisfied. He angrily left King's Landing and returned to his fiefdom, Dragonstone, an island in the sea outside Blackwater Bay. Renly was the master of laws, while his second brother, Stannis Baratheon, was the master of ships. Renly offered a hypocritical farewell to his brother's departure, but once Stannis made a decision, no one could persuade him except for Robert. Stannis left resolutely and did not bid farewell to Renly. However, Renly was an optimistic person and did not mind this. Although the master of ships among the important officials of the small council was absent, this did not affect the daily political meetings at the Iron Throne. Beneath the Iron Throne, the other important members of the small council were all present: the Lord Commander of the King's Guard, the fearless Barristan Selmy, the Master of Whisperers, Varys, whose bald head was as shiny as when King Robert was present, the Master of Coin, Peter Baelish, whose face was terribly swollen 2 days ago, but now the bruising had disappeared, with only a faint blue mark on the right corner of his mouth, which he said was a happy wound caused by playing a masochistic game with a prostitute while drunk, and Grand Maester Pycelle, the great scholar of 4 dynasties. Pycelle was born in 216 AC and was 82 years old this year. His bald head was covered with black age spots, and the hair on both sides and the back of his head was all white, hanging down long. His maester's chain was made of 24 metal links, representing his mastery of 24 different fields of expertise. The metal pieces hung heavily from his neck to his chest. Grand Maester Pycelle valued his long, snow-white beard the most, which he regarded as the foundation of his honor and pride. Pycelle entered the royal palace at the age of 42 and had served 4 kings, Aegon V, Jaehaerys II, Aerys II, and Robert I. He respected Tywin Lannister of the Westerlands the most and was a loyal member of the small council to the Lannister family of the Westerlands. For a small council meeting, as long as at least 3 members of the small council were present, the meeting's decisions had legal effect. This was also why Renly was not afraid of his brother Stannis leaving. Renly was loved by his brother Robert in everything. He was the heir to Storm's End, the Duke. But according to the laws of the country and the order of family inheritance, Stannis Baratheon should have become the Duke of the rich Storm's End. But Robert did not like Stannis, who was cold and cruel to everyone, so in the name of the king, he bestowed Storm's End to his younger brother Renly Baratheon, and granted the barren and sparsely populated Dragonstone to Stannis. Stannis had long suffered from the unfair treatment of his brother Robert, and this time was no different. Robert left, and according to the order of seniority, he could have become the acting king, but unfortunately, it was not him again. Robert still gave the honor of acting king to his younger brother Renly Baratheon. Renly did not feel comfortable sitting on the Iron Throne, which symbolized the highest power of the Seven Kingdoms. The Iron Throne was very cold and hard. From the day it was born, it had been around for 298 years. It was forged by Aegon, the first king of the Targaryen dynasty. In the first year of Aegon's conquest, King Aegon had his dragon, Balerion the Black Dread, melt down thousands of swords discarded by the enemy when they surrendered, and it took 59 days to complete the construction of this royal throne. The Iron Throne was covered with spikes and barbs, making it uncomfortable to sit on. The back of the chair also had spikes, so you couldn't lean back when you were tired. If you weren't careful, the spikes and blades would cut your hands or body. The founding Emperor Aegon deliberately used thousands of enemy swords to forge this throne to remind future kings that the throne was hard-won, and that it was not easy to be a king. They had to cherish it and work diligently for the country. The last king of the Targaryen dynasty, the Mad King Aerys II, was often cut and injured by the Iron Throne because of his violent temper. There were even rumors that the Iron Throne had killed several kings. For example, Maguire died after accidentally hitting the outward-facing tip of the Iron Throne. Of course, there were rumors in secret that Maguire was pushed from behind before he hit it. Although Renly did not enjoy sitting on the Iron Throne, he still had to sit on it. "My lords, I have received news that King Robert and Queen Cersei, along with everyone else, have crossed the Neck, the hundreds of miles of swamp in the north, and are expected to arrive at Winterfell in the north in about 10 days. A smattering of applause rang out in the throne room. Most of the courtiers had followed the king on his journey, including the Queen's two brothers, Jaime Lannister and Tyrion Lannister, known as the Little Demon. The throne room was very empty, with only a few people. The following political affairs were still the same trivial matters that Renly had no interest in. When Renly clearly showed a bored and tired expression, the Master of Whisperers, Varys, said, "Duke Renly, my lords, 2 vicious cases have recently occurred in Flea Bottom. One was in the street where brown soup is sold, where a mercenary of the Brave Companions was killed. The other was in the underground arena of Flea Bottom, where an even more serious violent incident occurred, resulting in several deaths and more than 20 injuries. Who is the murderer? Have they been caught?" Renly immediately became interested, his blue eyes shining.